It all started when a high school boy called out to Kiriyama. Gathering his courage, he confessed that he liked her and asked her to go out with him while offering his hand. His name was Hirachika Ishizuki, a second-year high school student kneeling before the girl he loved. He had finally made it this far after working so hard. Everything he had done was for this very moment. As his heart pounded, a sudden gust of wind swept through, causing Hirachika to open his eyes and call out to Kiriyama. Looking around, he realized that the place around him had completely changed, and he quickly stood up. He was confused, thinking that he had just been on the rooftop. Calling out for Kiriyama again, he wondered where she was, unable to understand what was happening. Then, someone descended behind him and welcomed him as the Love Master. The unexpected greeting left Hirachika bewildered. A floating woman appeared before him, accompanied by another girl with fairy-like wings. The beautiful woman asked if he was Hirachika Ishizuki and told him to smile. Still in shock, Hirachika demanded to know who she was. The woman revealed that she was the goddess of Clementine, leaving him stunned by the claim. The goddess informed him that she had a favor to ask, but refusal was not an option and urged him to understand. Hirachika immediately exploded in anger and demanded to know if she was responsible for this. The goddess calmly confirmed it, and he asked if she was also the one who had brought him to that strange place. She answered that she had done exactly that. Furious, Hirachika cursed her and accused her of ruining everything. He had been in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime confession, but the goddess simply stated that she did not care about that. She assured him that he would be sent back as long as he listened to her request. The fairy girl tried to calm him down, but Hirachika remained bitter, angrily thinking about how he had been taken away right in the middle of his confession. The goddess confirmed that this was indeed the case, and when he asked if she was telling the truth, she merely remarked that doubting a god seemed blasphemous. Since he had no choice in the matter, Hirachika asked what exactly she wanted him to do. Without hesitation, the goddess ordered him to save the world. The demand shocked him once again, and he protested that such a task was far too great. The goddess explained that she was not asking him to defeat the Demon King or anything like that, because the Demon King had already been defeated just last week. Hirachika was surprised to hear that it had happened so recently. The goddess then revealed that the Demon King would revive again in 30 days. The fairy girl agreed, causing Hirachika to stare in disbelief and ask whether the Demon King would truly return. The goddess confirmed that it was true and explained that the next generation of the hero party was already scheduled to defeat him. The fairy girl pointed out that she probably should not phrase it that way. Admitting her mistake, the goddess continued and explained that, during his final moments, the Demon King had cast some terrible curse. Hirachika wondered about it as she described it as an endless and cruel game. The goddess explained that it was basically nothing more than a petty act of spite directed at her, and she dismissed it as childish. However, the fairy girl pointed out that, to be fair, the Demon King had been revived and defeated hundreds of times. Because of that, she admitted that she could not say she failed to understand how he felt. Hirachika was left confused and wondered what any of that had to do with him. The goddess revealed that the real problem started there. The curse involved the next generation of heroes, who were supposed to defeat the Demon King 30 years later. However, the Demon King had stolen the ability to fall in love from the 7 girls who were destined to become the mothers of those future heroes. Hearing that, Hirachika stood there dumbfounded and questioned the idea of losing the ability to fall in love. The goddess became irritated by his reaction and angrily wondered if he was making fun of her. She furiously explained that without love, there would be no marriage, and without marriage, the next generation of heroes would never even be born. Jibril, the fairy girl, quickly tried to calm the goddess down. After stopping herself, the goddess regained her composure. To restore the girl's ability to love, she had summoned Hirachika Ishizuki from another world. In her eyes, he was the ultimate sage of romance, an expert on love, and the master of love. The title alone left Hirachika shocked. The goddess had already called him that earlier, but he still could not believe she was referring to him. Embarrassed by the title, he complained and questioned why he had been dragged into something like this. To him, it felt like the worst possible situation. The goddess then called over to Jibril, and asked whether Hirachika was really the right person and wondered if there had been some mistake. She admitted that she could not sense any kind of love master aura from him and doubted whether anyone would truly fall for someone who looked so unreliable. In response, Jibril reminded her that she herself had previously insisted that he was definitely the right choice. Hirachika clicked his tongue and adjusted his tie before calling the goddess useless. The insult immediately angered her, and she demanded to know what he had just called her. Hirachika explained that while it was true that he had mastered all kinds of romantic knowledge, she seemed like the type who would actually be difficult to win over. In his opinion, beautiful women were much easier to charm. The goddess became confused and questioned what he meant by that. Hirachika replied that it was not something he could openly explain and sought Jibril's approval. Jibril immediately refused to get involved. The goddess argued against him, acting as though he really could do it if given the opportunity, and doubted that Haruchika even had what it took. With a confident smile, Haruchika stepped closer to the goddess until their faces were only inches apart, fixing his eyes on her. The sudden closeness caught the goddess by surprise, and she felt that he was being far too rude as she tried to pull away. However, Haruchika kept her close and continued staring directly at her. Growing uncomfortable, the goddess asked him to stop looking at her like that. She tried to convince him that she was not particularly beautiful, but Haruchika simply acknowledged her words while remaining in the same position. He then explained that beautiful women were easy to charm and that she was simply too beautiful. Hearing that, the goddess became nervous, and her heart began pounding. She tried to deny it, but before she could compose herself, Haruchika pulled her closer and questioned whether she still refused to accept him. The goddess was left speechless. Meanwhile, Haruchika continued gazing at her, causing her cheeks to turn red. The goddess eventually dropped to her knees. Seeing the result, Haruchika felt satisfied and thought that perhaps he had gone a little too far. Jibril stared in amazement at what he had done to the goddess herself and wondered what exactly the love master had done. Haruchika explained that it was nothing much and that he had simply played a small trick on her mind. Jibril remained confused by what he meant by a trick. Haruchika then explained that humans naturally maintain a certain distance depending on their relationship with others. If some random old man were to approach someone with the same closeness as a lover, the reaction would be disgust. Jibril noted that disgust was putting it lightly and that it would practically be a crime. Haruchika continued and explained that he had first provoked the goddess, causing her to approach him on her own, and then he used that momentum to invade her personal space. However, he explained that if he had stopped there, she would have only felt uncomfortable, as though he were some intruder. According to him, the important part came afterward. At the same time, he maintained eye contact with her and perfectly synchronized his breathing with hers. He explained that gazing into each other's eyes was something lovers naturally do, and when lovers spend time together, their breathing gradually falls into the same rhythm. Haruchika had intentionally recreated that physical condition and made her body recognize him as her lover. Jibril wondered if such a thing was really possible. Haruchika admitted that it was not easy and explained that instantly matching another person's breathing required an incredible amount of practice. Once the body was fooled, the heart rate would rise, and the brain would release chemicals such as phenylethylamine, estrogen, and endorphins, all of which encouraged romantic feelings. At that point, his words would be received like the whispers of a lover. If he whispered into her ear with a deep voice and made her strongly aware of his presence, resisting him would become almost impossible. Hearing the explanation, Jibril could only stare in amazement. Meanwhile, Haruchika secretly thought that if things had not worked out with the goddess, he could have simply gone home. However, he concluded that the useless goddess had been far too easy. Jibril remained impressed, finally understanding why he was called the Love Master, while the goddess continued to doze off. Haruchika then brought up the 7 girls the goddess had mentioned earlier and asked if she would really send him back if he succeeded. Deep down, he regretted throwing everything away in order to master these techniques. Still half asleep, the goddess agreed and even made a promise. Haruchika felt irritated, thinking that he had done all of this for the sake of confessing his feelings. All that remained was hearing her answer, and he had already come so far. He was determined to return to her side. Accepting the task, Haruchika agreed to do it and formed a deal with the goddess. After making the agreement, the goddess stood back up and warned him that after treating her so rudely, she would not tolerate him claiming that he could not do it. Haruchika confidently declared that he would never say such a thing. Relieved, the goddess let out a sigh and returned to the main topic. Raising her hand, she once again addressed Haruchika Isezaki as the Love Master and declared that if he wished to return, he would have to restore love to the hearts of those girls. Until all 7 of them had fallen in love with him, he would not be allowed to go back. After announcing that the title call was over, the goddess stated that she would be returning and informed Jibril that she would leave the rest to her. Before Jibril could even react, the goddess vanished from sight. Watching her disappear, Jibril complained about how the goddess was always like that. She then turned toward Haruchika and apologized on the goddess's behalf. Haruchika simply accepted it and asked whether things were difficult for her as well. Jibril grabbed Haruchika's hand and assured him that he could leave the support of the Love Master to her. Haruchika accepted that but asked her to stop calling him the Love Master. Jibril suggested shortening it to just Master, and he agreed to that. Wondering what he was supposed to do next, Haruchika asked her, but Jibril merely smiled. Jibril then cast a teleportation circle and explained that the first thing she needed to do was take him to the location of the first target. Moments later, the 2 of them were teleported elsewhere and appeared high above another place. Seeing himself suspended in midair, Haruchika became frightened, but Jibril reassured him that he would not fall. She informed him that the first girl was a student at the Night Academy in Mekil, the royal capital of the Philo Kingdom. Hearing the name Night Academy, Haruchika reacted nervously. Jibril confirmed it and pointed toward its location. In his mind, Haruchika thought that with goddesses and angels already appearing before him, it might be a little late for such thoughts, but everything was beginning to feel more and more like a fantasy world. Jibril informed him that the first target was the youngest daughter of a militant noble family that possessed territory on the border of the Demon King's domain. Her clan was a family of warriors who hunted monsters as part of their everyday lives. Upon hearing that, Haruchika imagined a fierce clan of warriors and wondered whether this was really supposed to be a simple story about love. Jibril ignored the remark and changed the subject. She explained that she had already arranged his transfer to the academy and that he would be enrolled as an exchange student from a neighboring country. She had even arranged for him to be placed in the same class as the target and seated right beside her. Hearing that, Haruchika immediately panicked, since he knew nothing about the common sense of that world. Jibril reassured him and told him to leave everything to her. Since only Haruchika could see her, she would remain by his side the entire time and support him. Even so, Haruchika wondered if everything would really be alright. Jibril also mentioned that the love technique he had used on the goddess had been impressive and asked why he had chosen such a direct approach with the girl on the rooftop. Surprised, Haruchika asked if she had been watching, and Jibril apologized. As they prepared to descend, Jibril excused herself and wrapped her arms around him from behind. During the descent, Haruchika quietly muttered that the girl had been his first love. Jibril asked what he had just said, but Haruchika brushed it off and claimed it was nothing. After arriving, the two leaned forward to observe their surroundings. Jibril pointed out that one of the girls fighting inside the arena was their target. They watched as two people crossed swords in an intense duel while students around the arena cheered for them. During the battle, the male fighter became enraged and prepared to strike his opponent. However, the woman quickly avoided the incoming sword. As she evaded the attack, she countered and struck her opponent, causing him to lose. Jibril then informed Haruchika that the girl fighting over there was their first target, Lady Marion Bonet. At the academy, the professor announced that he would be introducing a transfer student. Immediately, the students began whispering among themselves, wondering why someone would transfer at such a strange time during the school year. Others became curious about what kind of person the newcomer would be. The professor then called him inside and informed the class that he was an exchange student from a neighboring country. With that, Haruchika Ishizuki was introduced to everyone. Haruchika greeted the class and informed them that starting that day, he would be studying alongside them. He introduced himself as Haruchika Ishizuki and explained that certain circumstances had delayed his transfer. He expressed his hope that everyone would get along with him. The girls in the classroom were left stunned by him. One admired his calm appearance, another commented on his elegant manners, and another even wondered if he might secretly be royalty traveling incognito. To Haruchika, first impressions were the most important. He had mastered the art of presenting the image he wanted others to see. With a gentle smile, a low voice, and by speaking slowly while clearly pronouncing every word, he was confident that he could create the impression of being kind, refined, and intelligent. The professor looked around the classroom and called on Marion Bonet, asking her to raise her hand. After she did so, the professor informed Haruchika that the empty seat beside her was his. Haruchika then took his seat. Marion welcomed him and expressed that it was nice to meet him, and Haruchika returned the greeting. In his mind, Haruchika had imagined Marion to be some kind of fierce Amazon warrior, but she was not like that at all. Instead, she looked like an ordinary and cute girl. As he observed Marion, Haruchika activated the appraisal skill that Jibril had given him. Information immediately appeared before his eyes, showing her name, age, occupation, and skills. He also noticed a current affection value, which was sitting at 0. Surprised that the ability actually worked, Haruchika concluded that all he had to do was raise that affection value. He even considered trying to test things during the next break. After some time, the professor dismissed the class for the day. As the students prepared to head home, Haruchika called out to Marion and remarked that the sword she carried was truly a masterwork. Happily, Marion explained that she had designed it herself from the beginning and had the finest blacksmith in her territory forge it. She proudly mentioned that it was not only beautiful in design, but also incredibly sharp. Haruchika praised her excellent taste and remarked that if she could properly wield such a weapon, she must be quite strong. However, Marion humbly denied it and insisted that she would not go that far. She then suggested that he simply call her Marion and that she would call him Haruchika as well. Afterward, she lightly patted his back. At that moment, Haruchika felt that he had found the key. In his mind, the trick to entering someone's inner circle was to praise the things they took pride in. He mentioned that he had actually watched her fight the previous day. His method was simple: ask people about what they loved showing off, agree with them, and praise them. If done correctly, the affection value would naturally rise on its own. Hearing that he had seen her, Marion became embarrassed and shy. Meanwhile, Jibril, who stood behind Haruchika, watched in amazement and once again recognized why he was called the Master of Love. When lunchtime arrived, Haruchika found himself growing frustrated. He could not understand why Marion's affection value had not increased at all despite their conversation earlier. From her reactions, she had seemed only 1 or 2 steps away from being completely won over, and yet the number remained at 0. Unable to believe that it had not risen even slightly, he questioned how that was possible while Jibril tried to comfort him, reminding him that it was only the first day. Haruchika called out to Jibril, but she immediately became irritated when he shortened her name, complaining that such a nickname would only lead to complaints. Already stressed, Haruchika told her to stop talking because that was not the issue. He asked whether the affection value really moved at all. Jibril answered that she was fairly certain it did, but admitted that seeing it remain at 0 was the first case she had ever encountered, so even she did not know what was happening. Hearing that only irritated Haruchika even more, and he muttered about how useless that answer was. Panicking, Jibril asked where he was going. Haruchika continued walking and reasoned that if the basic premise itself was uncertain, then he could not do anything with confidence. Whether Marion was simply a special case or not, he decided to test the system on other girls. For now, he chose the girl standing in the hallway. Jibril nervously asked if he meant that intimidating-looking girl. Meanwhile, Haruchika fixed his gaze on her, causing the girl to wonder what he was staring at. The next morning, the girl he had looked at in the hallway now had an affection value of 100. She called out to Haruchika with affection, and the same thing was happening with many of the other girls in the school. Numerous girls admired him, and when he casually waved to one of them, she immediately blushed. Haruchika noticed that affection values were steadily increasing everywhere. As he had suspected, Marion was the only abnormal case. He finally understood what it meant for someone to have their ability to love stolen away. Since the previous afternoon, he had been testing the system on every girl he came into contact with. A blonde girl had reached 89 affection points, a short-haired girl had reached 87, and another girl had reached 97. The affection values increased normally for all of them. In fact, because they were not emotionally jaded, they were surprisingly easy to win over. While Haruchika was lost in thought, Marion sat beside him and teased him about how popular he had become. Haruchika laughed and remarked that everyone had been friendly, which was a great help. However, he personally wanted to become closer to her. In response, Marion simply laughed and remarked that his smile looked fake, something people must have told him before. Even after hearing that, Haruchika became irritated because she still showed no reaction at all. Every tactic he had used so far had completely failed. He realized that he needed some kind of breakthrough to solve this problem. Jibril also panicked after seeing that Marion had not reacted in the slightest. Haruchika merely admitted that his friends had indeed told him the same thing before. Later, Haruchika and Marion were together at the arena. Haruchika remained deep in thought, still wondering what exactly was wrong with Marion and knowing that he had to do something about it. Holding a wooden sword, Marion called out to him and warned that daydreaming during sword practice would get him seriously hurt. Haruchika apologized and began observing the other students. Even if they were not on Marion's level, everyone else still appeared ridiculously strong. He merely tried to imitate what he saw and copied their posture. Seeing this, Marion was left speechless and wondered what kind of stance he was using, since he looked like a complete amateur. Haruchika quickly defended himself, insisting that he was not. However, Marion only teased him further, convinced that he was definitely an amateur. She then demonstrated the proper stance and, in an instant, pointed her sword directly at him. The sudden movement caught Haruchika by surprise. He became nervous and wondered how she had managed to close the distance so quickly. He had not seen it happen at all. Haruchika had gone through intense physical conditioning simply to become more popular, and he had always been somewhat confident in his reflexes. Yet Marion had effortlessly proven him wrong. Marion looked proud after demonstrating her skill and pointed out that there was no way a complete amateur could have passed the transfer exam for the Night Academy. To her, Haruchika clearly seemed to have his own reasons. Slightly irritated, Haruchika suddenly noticed a man sliding across the ground, which startled him. Looking around, he saw several students lying on the ground unconscious. Surprised, he wondered if it had been 5 against 1. Marion explained that even 5 people together would only barely be a match for that person. She then introduced him as Dean McAllister, the one known as the strongest student in the night class. One student attempted to attack Dean, but Dean effortlessly dodged and immediately counterattacked. The blow sent the student flying, and Dean proudly looked down on everyone, considering such a level of skill to be an embarrassment to the Royal Night Academy. Everyone stared at him, and even Haruchika was astonished by his strength. Calling him strong hardly even described it. Dean then noticed them and walked over to Marion. He questioned why she still could not make up her mind. In his eyes, she should be grateful that he was willing to marry someone as unrefined as her. Marion angrily rejected the idea and insisted that she had never asked for such a thing. She bluntly stated that if he wanted a feminine woman, he should simply look for someone else. Dean silently accepted her answer and walked away. Curious, Haruchika asked why Dean was acting as though Marion already belonged to him. Letting out a sigh, Marion explained that Dean was her fiancé and that the arrangement had already been decided. Hearing that left Haruchika shocked. Marion explained that Dean's strength was the reason behind it, as the Bonet family valued strength above all else. Their families had arranged the marriage without asking for her opinion. All that remained was a duel between the two of them. If Dean could prove that he was truly stronger than her, the matter would be settled. However, Marion had no desire to get married because she wanted to become a knight. Because of that, she had continued refusing to fight him. Deep down, though, she knew that she was only delaying the inevitable. Haruchika asked whether victory against him was truly impossible. Marion immediately became irritated and angrily pointed out that even an amateur should be able to tell by looking whether she could win or not. At that moment, Haruchika heard a sound and wondered what it was. It turned out to be the affection value, and to his surprise, he discovered that it could also move in the negative direction. The next morning, Marion arrived at school while avoiding everyone around her. She coldly sat beside Haruchika. Noticing her, he greeted her with a good morning, only to be completely ignored. Jibril immediately panicked and asked her master what he was doing. Marion's favorability had fallen into the negatives, and it had dropped like a stone. Meanwhile, Haruchika calmly thought about what to do after the previous day's events. He spoke with Marion and pointed out that refusing to fight simply because she did not want to get married was no different from losing by default. Marion defended herself, insisting that she had not lost. Haruchika questioned what was so wrong with the arrangement since it had been decided between their families. If she hated being called someone who lost by forfeiture, then she should simply fight Dean already. He even suggested that perhaps getting married, having children, and settling down might not be such a bad life. Those words infuriated Marion. Grabbing Haruchika by the collar, she passionately declared that she wanted to become a knight. The thought of getting married and having children was something she found utterly unbearable, and she insisted that she would rather die than live such a life. Meanwhile, Haruchika simply grins to himself after hearing the word unbearable. Without any romantic feelings, he realized that anyone would naturally react that way when told to marry someone and have children. At that moment, Marion's affection value dropped to -50, causing Jibril to panic. She pointed out that it had fallen another 10 points from the previous day's total. In her opinion, Marion had probably spent the entire night dwelling on the matter and becoming even more irritated. Jibril frantically shook Haruchika and questioned what he was seriously trying to accomplish, since Marion clearly hated him now. However, Haruchika gave no answer. In his mind, everything was proceeding just fine. There was no problem at all, because he believed he was moving closer to his goal. After all, falling in love could happen in an instant. Inside the classroom, Marion's current affection value had fallen to -99. Irritated, Marion told Haruchika to stop staring at her, but he immediately denied it and insisted that he was not even looking at her, thinking that she was being too full of herself. In his mind, he wondered if the affection value could even drop any lower and became curious whether -99 was the limit. Meanwhile, Jibril was in a panic and demanded to know what he was doing. She pointed out that this had gone beyond simple hatred. Even she had been shocked when she saw the value reach -99. In her eyes, that level was close to murderous intent. Haruchika calmly reassured her not to worry, believing that all the preparations had already been completed. All that remained was the trigger, leaving Jibril confused. At that moment, Dean suddenly entered the classroom, and Haruchika immediately realized that he was the trigger. Everything had been arranged by Haruchika, and Dean was visibly furious. Dean marched over and slammed a letter onto Haruchika's desk. Marion was startled and demanded to know what was going on. She quickly realized that the paper was a challenge letter. Haruchika explained that since Marion's family intended to marry her off to the strongest man, he had decided that Dean should not be the one. His words only angered Marion further, and she questioned why he was interfering in something that had nothing to do with him. To her, his actions were becoming genuinely disturbing. Dean then approached Haruchika and mocked him for having strange tastes if he had truly fallen for Marion. He made it clear that he did not mind handing that strange monkey over to him. Dean told Haruchika that the thought of Haruchika believing himself to be stronger than him was something he simply could not ignore. Haruchika calmly replied that he had never asked for such consideration. Dean accepted the challenge and threatened that 7 days later, at whatever time and place Haruchika chose, he would teach him his place. As this happened, Marion's affection value finally dropped to -100. Furious, she demanded to know what kind of harassment this was supposed to be. Seeing the number, Haruchika realized that -99 had not been the limit after all. Haruchika reminded her that she herself had said that she did not want to marry Dean. However, since she had been dragging the matter out for so long, he had decided to fight Dean in her place as her proxy. The explanation only made Marion angrier. Slamming her hand onto the desk, she demanded to know what kind of logic that was. Haruchika proudly explained that he was simply being considerate. If he won, then she would not have to marry Dean at all. Marion immediately insisted that there was no way he could win. However, Haruchika reasoned that even if he lost, she could still claim that she herself had never been defeated. Those words caused Marion to grab him by the collar in frustration. She angrily scolded him and called him a jerk, believing that there was a proper time and place for saying such things. She was so upset that the rest of the class noticed the commotion. Their classmates began whispering among themselves, wondering what Haruchika had done and recalling that he had also argued with McAllister. Despite everything, Haruchika simply grinned and suggested that if she was dissatisfied with his approach, then she should spend the next 7 days training him so that he could actually defeat Dean. The unexpected proposal left Marion completely speechless. Later, inside the arena, Marion resumed training him. She loudly ordered Haruchika to get back on his feet unless he wanted to be killed by her right there. Haruchika replied that it would be better if she did not do that, pointing out that the challenge letter clearly stated that if he ran away or became unable to fight, he would automatically lose. Marion scolded Haruchika and told him that he truly was the worst. With only 1 week remaining, she warned him that if he lost, he would be killed, because she herself would be the one to do it. Haruchika could only ask her to go easy on him. 2 days later, the training continued. Exhausted, Haruchika collapsed onto the ground. Marion immediately pointed her sword at him and demanded to know why he was resting. Without giving him a chance to recover, she ordered him to get back up. She reminded him that he was supposed to win and mocked him for his big talk. Inwardly, Haruchika thought that such treatment was to be expected from someone with an affection value of -100. In his eyes, she showed absolutely no mercy and had no problem tormenting someone she hated with all her heart. However, he did not consider it a problem. After all, he had not spent his middle school years being hated for nothing. Jibril commented that he was beginning to say some rather depressing things. Haruchika immediately told her to stop and complained that she should quit reading his thoughts. Marion continued shouting at him and scolding him for wasting time. According to her, the only possible chance of victory was in the opening strike, when McAllister might still be caught off guard. All he had to do was increase the speed of his thrust as much as possible. Haruchika answered that he understood. Deep inside, however, Haruchika had already resolved himself. He would do whatever it took to return to his original world. Unfortunately, it did not seem like there were any convenient cheat items that could hand him an easy victory. Jibril could hardly believe what she was hearing, and Haruchika admitted that winning itself was not even his real objective. Confused, Jibril questioned what he meant. Before she could get an answer, Marion once again ordered him to stop resting and continue swinging his sword. Eventually, the promised week passed. Haruchika had truly devoted himself to training, and throughout that time, Marion had been the one helping him. Back at the Bonet family estate, Marion relaxed in her bathtub and let out a sigh. If Haruchika lost, she knew she would no longer be able to make excuses to her father. At that point, she seriously thought that she would kill that worthless fool herself. She recalled the words her father had spoken after hearing about the duel the following day. Although it was merely a proxy duel, Marion had already made up her mind. Her father had decided that he would personally come and watch as well. After finishing her bath, Marion cleaned herself and reflected on the past week. The training schedule had been brutal, but somehow they had managed to complete it. To her surprise, Haruchika possessed more courage than she had expected. At this point, whatever happened would happen. Soon, the day of the match arrived. The announcer introduced the competitors and excitedly informed the crowd that it was McAllister's first match in quite some time, stirring up enthusiasm throughout the arena. Dean merely grinned and arrogantly remarked that everyone should be grateful, as he had been willing to entertain such a pathetic farce. Nearby, Marion quietly expressed her gratitude. Haruchika knew that he did not necessarily need to win. However, if he failed to act as though he genuinely intended to win, then his plan would fail. The announcer explained that the arena had been enchanted with magic that would convert lethal attacks into non-lethal ones. After going over the rules and declaring that the match would end the moment either fighter landed a lethal blow, the announcer officially signaled the start of the duel. Haruchika knew that his opening move was crucial. As soon as the duel began, he rushed toward Dean and managed to leave a wound on his waist. Blood appeared, and Haruchika himself was unsure whether he had truly landed the attack properly or not. Dean frowned at the unexpected injury, leaving the audience speechless. Enraged, Dean treated him like a mere nuisance and immediately charged forward. Slamming into Haruchika with overwhelming force, he sent him flying across the arena before crashing heavily onto the ground. Marion was stunned by the sight, and blood soon began to flow from Haruchika's body. Dean remarked that he had originally intended to end the fight with a single strike, but after what had happened he had changed his mind. He no longer intended to let things end so easily. Despite his injuries, Haruchika smiled. He knew he had to stay conscious and continue resisting. Struggling to his feet, he felt that this situation was exactly what he had hoped for. His reaction only angered Dean further. Furious, Dean prepared to attack again, but Haruchika barely managed to evade the blow. He was not mocking Dean. Haruchika fully understood that Dean could kill him with a single hit, and that was exactly why he had to avoid any lethal attack. The first strike had never been intended to finish the duel. Its purpose had been to provoke Dean. Victory itself did not matter. His true goal was to restore Marion's ability to love. Dean easily avoided Haruchika's next attack and answered with a punch straight to his face. Jabril and Marion watched in disbelief, while the audience began growing frustrated. To them, this was no longer even a match. Voices rose from the crowd, calling Haruchika pathetic and urging him to give up. Even Marion began to think that they were right. There was no way for him to win anymore. Yet Haruchika continued trying to stand up and fight. Amused, Dean mocked him for caring so much about someone like Marion, whom he compared to a mountain monkey. Haruchika immediately rejected that idea. Dean closed the distance again. He was simply too fast for Haruchika's current body to keep up with. Treating the fight like a game, Dean struck him in the face once more. Dean was clearly enjoying himself, and the crowd enthusiastically called for Haruchika to be killed. Marion could only sigh. She could not understand why Haruchika was pushing himself so desperately. Even with her father watching seriously from the audience, Haruchika stubbornly struggled to rise again. There was something about seeing someone continue resisting despite being completely outmatched that naturally made others want to support them. The audience could hardly believe that Haruchika was still standing, though many continued telling him to give up. Haruchika understood this reaction well. It was a psychological effect where people instinctively rooted for the weaker side. It was known as the underdog effect. Marion was no exception. Tears had already begun streaming down Marion's face. In her mind, she remembered how Haruchika had told her that she should simply give up and get married, yet she could not understand why he was willing to go this far for her. Then came the moment when the girl who hated him began cheering for him. As Haruchika dashed forward, Marion desperately called out his name. At that instant, a contradiction emerged between her feelings and her actions. In order to resolve that conflict, everything flipped at once. Marion began cheering for Haruchika to win, leaving Jabril stunned as Marion's current affection value instantly rose to 100. Hearing her voice, Dean turned his attention toward Marion and became distracted. Seizing the opportunity, Haruchika attacked at the perfect moment and brought his strike down onto Dean's head. Completely out of breath, Haruchika could hardly believe that he had actually won. The announcer declared him the victor, leaving the crowd stunned by the unexpected outcome. To everyone watching, McAllister had been the obvious favorite. In truth, Haruchika had never needed to win the match itself. His real objective had been to restore Marion's ability to love, and that had happened the moment she called out his name. Meanwhile, Dean had completely lost consciousness. In Haruchika's eyes, neither Dean nor Marion had been honest with themselves. As Haruchika tried to catch his breath, Marion rushed toward him. Before he even realized what was happening, she threw herself at him and wrapped him in a hug. Even Jabril was startled by the sudden sight and wondered what in the world had happened and why Marion's affection value had reached 100. Haruchika simply chuckled. What he had done to Marion was an application of the Benjamin Franklin effect. Curious, Jabril wondered what that meant. Haruchika explained that it was a psychological effect named after the American politician Benjamin Franklin, who had used it to win over a member of the opposing party. He further explained that humans constantly seek consistency between their emotions and their actions. Since Marion had committed the contradictory act of cheering for a man she hated, cognitive dissonance had occurred within her. Because emotions could not tolerate conflicting with actions, her feelings naturally shifted to match what she had done. In other words, because she had cheered for him, her brain had convinced itself that she liked him, altering her perception. Therefore, by lowering the affection value all the way down, the contradiction would rebound with even greater force. That had been his reasoning from the beginning. Since the affection value had refused to rise normally, he had taken a gamble. Jabril could only stare at Haruchika in amazement, feeling that such a result was exactly what she had come to expect from him. Confidently, Haruchika wondered who she thought he was. However, Marion misunderstood and assumed that the question had been directed at her. Without hesitation, she answered with Haruchika's name. Realizing the misunderstanding, Haruchika simply brushed it off and told her it was nothing. Filled with happiness, Marion thanked him sincerely, but Haruchika insisted that he did not deserve such gratitude. Then, without warning, Marion suddenly kissed Haruchika right in front of everyone, leaving even the crowd in complete shock. Blushing deeply, Marion revealed that this was the first kiss she had ever given. It was also Haruchika's first kiss. Hearing that, Marion happily realized that she had been his first partner as well. Haruchika asked whether that made her unhappy. However, Marion immediately brightened and assured him that it was the opposite. To her, having her first kiss with the man who would become her husband was the best outcome possible. The moment Haruchika heard the word husband, his eyes widened in surprise. Before he could react, Marion quickly shut down any objections. Since she had already fallen in love with him, she intended to make him take responsibility. Excitedly, Marion explained that convincing the Bonet family would not be easy, which meant Haruchika would have to become even stronger than her. Hearing all of this, Haruchika was left stunned. Inwardly, he realized that things had become troublesome. He may have pushed things a little too far. At their school, Haruchika called out to Marion, and she asked what it was. Jibril mentioned that their master had safely secured victory in yesterday's duel, and because of that, Marion's affection level had also reached the maximum. Haruchika irritably asked what she was doing, since he was carrying her. However, Marion stayed close to him affectionately and admired how perfectly structured his features were. Haruchika asked if she was even listening. Marion answered that she was listening, and that what she was doing was perhaps flirting. Their classmates stared at the two of them and began gossiping about Haruchika. Feeling stressed, he told Marion that they should be concerned about the people around them. Marion explained that worrying about it was exactly what had led to the situation. She pointed out that he had actually defeated McAllister, and now everyone's eyes were on them. Haruchika told her to stop exaggerating. However, Marion revealed that Haruchika had suddenly risen to the top of the noble lady's list of potential husbands. Surprised, he asked if that was really true. Marion confirmed it and told him to become more aware of his own value. That was why she needed to clearly show everyone that Haruchika belonged to her, otherwise troublesome pests would start gathering around him. Seeing the two together, the girls around them became irritated. Marion quietly remarked that, in reality, Haruchika was not even that great of a man. Haruchika smirked at those bold words. Marion then explained that she knew nothing about his background, that he was weak, that his personality was terrible, and that he was arrogant. However, his love for her was extraordinary. Haruchika let out a sigh and pointed out that all of her evaluations were harsh, yet the part regarding his love was rated unbelievably high. Irritated, Marion pointed her sword at him and demanded to know whether she was wrong. Feeling nervous, Haruchika admitted that everything she said was exactly right. Marion then shared that the Boni family was unusual, especially her father, who seemed to have genuinely liked McAllister. To make him accept Haruchika, she thought they might need to deceive him somehow. Hearing that, Haruchika asked about the trick with a bad feeling. Marion proposed creating a fait accompli, putting it simply, procreation. Haruchika was stunned and immediately told her to stop jumping straight to prosperity on the very first move. He complained that the time between planting and harvesting was far too short and wondered if she was trying to grow bean sprouts. Marion innocently asked about the planting and treated him like the perverted one. Haruchika covered his face and wondered if her personality had changed. Marion replied that it had not changed, though she did feel unusually excited even to herself. Thinking about getting married had once felt like a dream to her. At that moment, their professor approached and commented that it was lovely to see them getting along so well, but class was about to begin. Haruchika immediately apologized. After class ended, the two began walking together. Marion suggested that, since they were already out, they should stop by somewhere. Haruchika then mentioned that he had been thinking about going on a date. Those words made Marion gasp in excitement as she happily celebrated the idea of an after-school date. It would actually be her first date. She admitted that she had never thought something like that would have anything to do with her, and she became so happy that she started blushing. Haruchika asked if she was serious, and Marion assured him that she was, even promising to put her sword away. Waving her hand enthusiastically, Marion urged him to hurry up. Before long, Haruchika found himself walking through the royal capital, Merkle City. As he looked at Marion, he noticed how cheerful she was. Watching her fool around so naturally and act like someone her age, he found Marion surprisingly cute. While walking together, Marion spotted a food stall and expressed her desire to eat there. The two stopped and began eating. Haruchika was shocked by the way she enjoyed the food. She was eating with such enthusiasm that she almost choked, which made him nervous for a moment. Fortunately, it only lasted briefly. Marion smiled at him afterward, and the two of them shared a laugh. After finishing their meal, they continued looking around the city. At one point, Marion suddenly stopped in front of a jewelry store and quietly admired something inside, though she ended up buying nothing. Later, they made their way to a high viewpoint overlooking the town. Haruchika was impressed by the incredible scenery. Marion agreed that it was beautiful and admitted that she had enjoyed herself a lot that day. Happy to hear that, Haruchika extended his hand toward her. Marion looked confused at first, only to discover a necklace resting in his hand. It was the same necklace she had been looking at earlier. Haruchika explained that she had seemed to want it. Filled with happiness, Marion embraced him and asked him to put it on her since their relationship had reached that stage. Haruchika carefully fastened the necklace around her neck and made sure it had clicked into place. Marion remarked that he really was clumsy. Haruchika admitted that he simply was not used to such things. Hearing that, Marion thanked him sincerely and confessed how happy she was. Blushing slightly, she realized for the first time that liking someone could bring such a warm feeling. After their date ended, Haruchika escorted Marion back to her home. She thanked him for the day and looked forward to seeing him again tomorrow. As he waved goodbye, Jibril proudly praised him for doing a good job. Jibril also mentioned that, even if Marion forgot, she should always remember the happiness she felt that day whenever she fell in love again. Haruchika quietly understood. Jibril then informed him that, if he wished, they had the option of not erasing Marion's memory and could return to this place after capturing the remaining targets. They could even choose different options. Those words caused memories to surface within Haruchika. Back then, his classmates had been gossiping about him. One of Sakura's friends complained that she had only come in second place while the nerdy boy with glasses had taken first place again, calling him creepy. Sakura, however, defended him and insisted that he was not creepy. She believed that Haruchika reaching the top of the class was the result of him facing challenges instead of running away, and she thought that was amazing. Haruchika had witnessed those words. From that moment onward, he resolved to change. And he did change. Through blood, sweat, and tears, he transformed himself. His classmates were astonished and eventually began praising him. Haruchika became popular. In fact, he became extremely popular. But none of that truly mattered. He had changed for one girl alone. His destined person was only one girl. He had reached that point through hard work. In the end, he confessed his feelings and asked her out. Returning to the present, Haruchika responded to Jibril's suggestion. He admitted that it did not sound bad, but that his home was not there. Jibril asked whether he was truly certain, and Haruchika answered without hesitation that he was. Meanwhile, inside the arena, Marion was facing 3 men at once. One after another, she defeated them until the last remaining opponent surrendered. Her coach then announced the end of the match. The boys watching nearby were amazed, commenting that Bonnet remained as strong as ever for defeating 3 opponents by herself. One of them mentioned hearing rumors that Marion had broken off her engagement with McAllister, while another admitted he did not know the details. Someone else observed that Marion seemed gentler than before. High above them, Haruchika watched while floating in the air. With those final thoughts, he bid farewell to Marion. At that moment, Marion was laughing when she suddenly paused. For some reason, she wondered whether she had just heard something. As they vanished from that place, Jibril asked whether they should proceed to the location of the next girl. Haruchika agreed and asked who their next target was. Jibril informed him that the next destination was Kurtenberg, the country's 3rd largest city and a famous port town. Waiting there at the Adventurers Guild was the Beastman receptionist, Lily Fafner. In Port Town Kurtelberg, the next target was Lily, the Beastman receptionist at the Adventurers Guild. Haruchika became curious about how beastmen were treated. Jibril explained that it was not much different from racial differences in their own world, and that there were still people who discriminated against them. Beastmen originally lived in the northern mountain regions, so seeing one in Kurtelberg, a southern port city, was quite unusual. Hearing that she was rare, Haruchika listened as Jibril explained that the guild master of Kurtelberg had recognized Lily's abilities and personally brought her over from the capital. Haruchika appeared troubled. If she had been the rude and arrogant type, things would have been easier. However, Jibril denied that, explaining that Lily was not like that. Besides, she was currently not assigned to represent any adventurers. Confused, Haruchika listened as Jibril revealed the reason. Every adventurer assigned to Lily had died one after another. Because of that, she had been given the nickname Miss Death, and everyone avoided her. Haruchika asked if it was supposed to be some kind of bad luck, finding the idea ridiculous. In his view, if she had been pushed down and weakened, then she would be easier to take advantage of. Jibril pointed out that what he was saying sounded rather awful. Soon, they arrived at the restaurant. Seeing the place, Haruchika confidently declared that it was time to begin the capture. As soon as they entered, the staff looked toward him. Lily noticed the unfamiliar face and thought he was probably a newcomer. One of the staff members approached him and asked if it was his first time there. Haruchika confirmed it and asked if adventurer registration was handled there. The woman replied that it was and guided him to follow her. However, Haruchika hesitated and asked whether registering there would mean she would become his representative. The staff member looked confused but confirmed that it was indeed the case. Haruchika then stated that he would rather have the girl over there instead, referring to Lily. Lily froze in surprise, and Haruchika bluntly explained that if he had to see someone's face almost every day, then he would rather choose a girl who matched his preferences. The staff member who had approached him was left speechless. After asking whether she really was not his type and receiving a firm answer that she was not, she exploded in anger and scolded him for making such selfish demands. Several men then approached Haruchika and called out to him. They could not believe that he had rejected the most popular girl, Kayla, in favor of that receptionist. They reminded him that Lily had a reputation. Curious, Haruchika asked about it, and one of the men explained that Lily was known as Miss Death. Every rookie she represented had ended up dead without exception, making her the owner of that infamous jinx. Hearing those words, Lily collapsed to the floor. However, Haruchika casually stated that if he broke the jinx, then the matter would be settled. Both Lily and the men were stunned by his response. One of the men became irritated and argued that they were only trying to help by warning him. Haruchika dismissed it as nothing more than meddling in other people's affairs. For him, it had to be Lily. Extending his hand toward her, he repeated his choice. Lily continued to hesitate, but Haruchika remained firm and repeated that he wanted her. He reassured her that she did not need to worry because he absolutely would not die. However, Lily argued that everyone always said the same thing. They all claimed they would be fine and that they would not die. Haruchika then proposed something. If he died, then at that moment, she could allow herself to fall into despair. From his perspective, if he were to die, then everyone would eventually die as well, and there was nothing that could be done about it. Lily was left speechless by his attitude and wondered just how arrogant he could be. Haruchika simply smiled, finding the whole thing exciting. In response, Lily told him not to blame her for whatever happened. A faint smile appeared on her face as she instructed him that the first step was filling out the registration forms. Meanwhile, Kayla and the other men could only stare in disbelief, their frustration clearly visible. As they left the guild, Jibril happily remarked that the initial contact seems to have been a success. Haruchika, however, was deep in thought and simply agreed. Noticing his expression, she asked if something was bothering him. He replied that it was nothing in particular, but right before they had left, he had tried using his appraisal skill. To his surprise, Lily's affection value had increased. Jibril was shocked, especially when comparing it to what had happened with Marion. Haruchika explained that none of those methods had affected Marion's relationship value, but this time it was different. Although the increase felt slow, it had definitely risen. He reasoned that, without even realizing it, he had been using techniques meant to raise a girl's fondness. According to him, humans naturally place each other in a hierarchy. Right in front of Lily, he had openly told another receptionist that he preferred her instead. By doing that, he had placed Lily in a higher position. In terms of attracting a girl, he believed that approach worked. Since he had clearly ranked her in a way everyone could understand, he saw no reason why favorable feelings would not develop. Jibril immediately panicked and wondered if Haruchika had mistaken the target. He denied that possibility and questioned the suspicious look in her eyes. If that was the case, then he would simply assume that the circumstances were different from what they had been with Marion. Jibril agreed with that reasoning, though she asked whether it was not a good thing that the relationship value was increasing normally. Haruchika answered that things appeared to be progressing smoothly this time, and he hoped that would continue. Regardless, he checked the map and found that his first quest was herb gathering. To him, it felt like a classic otherworld reincarnation cliché, and he wondered if that kind of writing was not simply lazy. Then he remembered the goddess. Jibril quickly reminded him that, despite everything, the goddess was still a divine being and deserved at least some respect and restraint. Haruchika then reviewed the details of the quest. Half a day's journey west of the city, inside the forest, there was a patch of herbs. The request required 20 stalks. Jibril became confused and asked whether he was seriously planning to gather herbs himself. Haruchika answered that he was. He intended to complete the quest properly. However, Jibril argued that if he only needed herbs, she could provide as many as he wanted. Haruchika lightly poked her nose and told her that she had the wrong idea. This stage was about building trust, and any deception would eventually become obvious. In his opinion, girls were especially sharp when it came to such things. The next day, they returned to the Kurtleberg Adventurers Guild. At the counter, Kayla was waiting together with Lily. She reminded Lily that she had declared she would never represent anyone again and went as far as claiming that beastmen were liars after all. Lily nervously denied it. She had once decided that if she only brought unhappiness to others, then she would never become anyone's representative again. However, Haruchika had chosen her and no one else. On top of that, he had firmly declared that he would not die. Because of that, she wanted to believe in him. Kayla warned her and expressed hope that she would not end up regretting the decision. In truth, despite all his confidence, Haruchika had no experience as an adventurer and could only register at the lowest rank. Because of that, the only quest available to him was herb gathering, which Kayla found amusing and laughed about. Even Lily had been surprised by that fact. Just as she was about to say something, Haruchika suddenly arrived and announced his return. Lily immediately panicked and asked whether Haruchika was all right. She began checking on him, asking if anything hurt or if there were any places that felt strange. Haruchika calmed her down and reassured her that he was completely fine, which brought a smile to Lily's face. Meanwhile, Jibril recalled what had happened. In the end, the herb gathering spot had been located on a steep cliff. Haruchika had almost fallen, but she had floated him to safety. Thanks to her intervention, everything had turned out fine. Overcome with relief, Lily dropped to her knees. She expressed how thankful she was and admitted that if anything had happened to him, she did not know what she would have done. Haruchika simply laughed and remarked that she was exaggerating. However, Lily quickly denied that and insisted that she was not. Looking at her concerned expression, Haruchika expected her relationship value to have risen considerably. Yet when he checked it, the value was 0. Even Lily was startled by his sudden reaction and asked what was wrong. Haruchika apologized and brushed it off as nothing, and Lily simply accepted his answer. Haruchika could not believe it. Despite how worried she had been, the value remained at 0. He began wondering if he had done something that made her dislike him. Afterward, Haruchika held out his hand toward Lily. Curious, she asked what it was about. Haruchika explained that there was something he wanted to discuss with her, but he did not want anyone else to overhear. Lily suggested using the lounge, but Haruchika wondered if they could perhaps have dinner together that evening instead. Since they were talking about it, he also asked her to recommend a good restaurant. Lily appeared hesitant. Her schedule was open, but she still seemed unsure. Haruchika then admitted that eating alone felt lonely, at least for him. Hearing that, Lily blushed and remarked that he really was helpless. She told him that she would first finish processing the exchange for the herbs and asked if he could wait. Haruchika agreed without hesitation and sat down. Jibril then called out to him and wondered how to describe the situation. Lily had accepted the dinner invitation without any resistance, and to her, it seemed almost too easy. Haruchika explained that it was not because Lily was easy. Rather, he had arranged things to unfold that way. According to him, girls generally liked teaching others. It allowed them to confirm their own usefulness, and there was also the instinct to guide and nurture. Asking her to recommend a delicious restaurant was, from a girl's perspective, one of the easiest topics to become involved with. Jibril questioned whether that alone was enough. Haruchika explained that, of course, it was not just that. He had deliberately framed the matter as needing help because eating alone felt lonely. The point was to place himself under her protection so that she would begin seeing him that way. Once he entered that protected position, affection would naturally start to grow. Haruchika then proudly pointed out the proof. Lily's affection value had reached 15. Soon, Lily finished her work and thanked him for waiting. Haruchika replied that simply looking at her had made the time pass in an instant. The comment made Lily become shy. Before they left, Kayla quietly watched them for a while. The two first went to a restaurant and enjoyed a meal while talking. Afterward, they walked through the streets together. As they spent time together, the affection value continued to rise, and even Jibril noticed it. By then, Lily's affection value had reached 70, leaving Jibril amazed. She praised Haruchika, believing that only someone like him could achieve such a result. The next morning, Jibril remarked that Lily's final affection value had exceeded 70 the previous day. At that pace, the capture might be completed that very day. Haruchika agreed. As they headed to the guild once again, he was full of confidence. After all, they had shared a table together one-on-one, and he believed there was no way she would not have fallen for him. Upon arriving, Lily greeted him with a cheerful good morning and thanked him for the dinner they had shared. However, Haruchika was left speechless. To his disbelief, the affection value had returned to 0. The shock was so great that he dropped to his knees. Haruchika was surprised when he noticed that Lily's affection value had definitely risen to 70 the day before. Lily greeted him and looked forward to assisting him again that day. Even so, Haruchika was still wondering how things had ended up that way. Lily began explaining that they were dealing with a dungeon that had already been cleared. However, if it was left unattended, monsters would begin to appear again, so periodic inspections were requested. Since only goblins appeared there, the task had been assigned to him. Meanwhile, Haruchika remained lost in thought. While they had been together the previous day, the rate of increase had clearly slowed down once it reached around 70. That meant her affection value dropped whenever he was not by her side. Lily noticed that Haruchika was not paying attention. She let out a sigh and thought that he was right, and that there was no point in listening to anything she had to say. Haruchika immediately rejected that idea. He repeated what she had just explained, mentioning that it was a cleared dungeon and that the job involved exterminating the goblins that spawned there. Relieved, Lily sighed softly after realizing that he had been listening. She explained that even though it was a beginner's dungeon, he still needed to prepare properly. Unlike when he was simply gathering herbs, there were still many dangers. Haruchika continued wondering whether her affection level dropped because her self-esteem was so low that negative thoughts took over whenever she was alone. That possibility seemed entirely reasonable to him. He remarked that she worried too much, just like she had the day before. Tears formed in Lily's eyes as she denied being a worrywart. She only believed that it was genuinely dangerous. Haruchika accepted her concern, and Lily told him that even if he failed, she would not mind if he ran away. The only thing that mattered to her was that he returned alive. Haruchika laughed, finding it somewhat problematic that a guild employee would say that failure was acceptable. In response, Lily desperately hoped he would not treat it as a joke, because she was being completely serious. Understanding her feelings, Haruchika reassured her that he would return safe and sound and hoped she would send him off with a smile. Lily agreed and asked him to be careful. After exchanging their farewells, Haruchika departed. As they headed into the forest, Jibril remarked that even if two people had their romantic feelings stolen, the way it manifested could differ from person to person. She wondered if that was what Haruchika meant. Haruchika explained that they had only seen 2 cases so far, but Marion and Lily were completely different. Marion's affection value had never increased. Lily's affection value, on the other hand, increased, but it dropped as soon as she was left alone. Jibril suggested using the same method that had been used with Marion. Haruchika immediately dismissed the idea, offending Jibril. He went on to explain that someone strong-willed like Marion had clear likes and dislikes. To gain her affection, someone simply needed to surpass the person she favored. However, with Lily, he believed that even killing her parents would probably only make her affection value drop to -100. Jibril then asked about the plan. Haruchika replied that the basic strategy was to somehow increase the amount of time they spent together. That was probably the only option available. Lily's desperation and the nickname Miss Death also continued to bother him. Putting those thoughts aside, Jibril decided that goblin subjugation should come first. Haruchika replied that he would rather avoid it if possible. Jibril reassured him that goblins were not very strong. However, that was not what Haruchika meant. Having grown up in modern Japan, he had almost no experience killing anything, especially something with a human shape. He barely even had any experience with fistfights. Jibril remarked that she had always imagined that people reincarnated into another world happily went around hunting monsters. Haruchika simply thought that people like that were just strange. After arriving, Haruchika found that the place had the classic atmosphere of a dungeon. A sign stood at the entrance, warning of death ahead and stating that entering the dungeon without a request from the Kurtleberg Adventurers Guild was forbidden. The two of them stepped inside, and Jibril explained that only goblins appeared on the first basement floor, so all they needed to do was make rounds and eliminate them. Haruchika acknowledged it and noticed that the inside was brighter than he had expected. Jibril explained that the dungeon had already been completely explored, so magical elimination tools had been installed throughout the area. Suddenly, they heard a sound, causing Haruchika to become alert. However, there was no sign of danger. At that moment, Jibril suddenly panicked and warned him to stop and watch where he was stepping. Haruchika paid no attention and wondered what had happened, even thinking that she was making too much noise. In the next moment he nearly fell into a hole, but Jibril immediately caught him, preventing him from falling. It had been a close call. Jibril observed that it appeared to be a pitfall trap that had already been activated, and she could not even see the bottom. Haruchika pointed out that if the trap had already been sprung, then someone must have fallen into it before. Jibril thought the same. Not long after, Jibril noticed something else, which was why she called out to Haruchika. She pointed out that there were 2 goblins directly ahead. However, Haruchika could not see anything. Jibril explained that she had excellent eyesight because she was an angel. Haruchika felt that being an angel had nothing to do with it. Even though he could not see them yet, Haruchika still prepared his weapon and got ready for battle. As he moved closer with his sword in hand, 2 goblins finally came into view. Before they could attack, he struck the first one and then quickly killed the second as well. Jibril was impressed by what she had seen and admired Haruchika's skill. Haruchika, meanwhile, felt relieved, though the experience still did not sit well with him. Soon after, Jibril noticed something again. Her reaction made Haruchika ask what was wrong, and she informed him that someone was approaching from the front, while another presence was coming from behind. Haruchika immediately became alert and pointed out that it was not as though she could actually see them. However, Jibril explained that she could hear footsteps. Her hearing had become extremely sensitive. Hearing that, Haruchika wondered how that could possibly have anything to do with being an angel, thinking that it sounded more like the ears of a devil. Haruchika panicked as he wondered whether there were other people inside the dungeon besides them, perhaps adventurers who had accepted the same extermination request. Before long, he spotted several figures wearing cloaks and carrying swords. Even Jibril became alarmed. From her reaction, it was clear that those people did not look like they were simply passing through. Haruchika also panicked and demanded to know who they were. In response, the cloaked figures moved to attack him. At that moment, memories of his training resurfaced, along with Marion's harsh words. She had once pointed out that, despite being annoyingly tough for a weakling and possessing decent instincts, he lacked real combat experience. She had even mocked him by saying that some random kid from the street would perform better. Marion had also scolded him for being too cowardly, warning that he would die if he flinched at every little thing. Although she casually remarked that his death would not matter to her, she had still advised him that if he wanted to win, he needed to stop being so jumpy. When Haruchika had asked how to do that, Marion herself had admitted that she did not know and jokingly suggested beating him to within an inch of his life until he got used to it. Remembering that painful lesson, Haruchika took a deep breath and reminded himself not to panic. He charged at the men one after another, striking with kicks and swings of his sword. He truly put Marion's training into practice. Afterward, he paused briefly, already running out of breath. It shocked him to realize that those men had genuinely intended to kill him. Still, Haruchika knew that they were nowhere near Marion's or McAllister's level. Compared to those two, these enemies were nothing extraordinary. However, facing such numbers meant entering a battle of attrition that would eventually turn against him. He could not understand what these men were after. Then an idea came to him. Jibril suggested escaping immediately through teleportation, but Haruchika refused. After carefully observing the situation, he quietly whispered something to Jibril. She immediately nodded in understanding. With their plan decided, Haruchika charged straight toward the cloaked men. As he closed the distance, he drove his knee into one of them and struck the man's face, forcing his way through the group. As Haruchika passed them, a sword slashed across his back, leaving a wound. Ignoring the pain, he continued running and pushed forward without stopping. Seeing this, one of the cloaked men became furious and urged the others to chase after Haruchika. Jibril informed him that they were almost there, and Haruchika reminded her not to make a mistake with the timing. Together, the two of them leaped into the pitfall. The cloaked men burst into laughter, believing that Haruchika had fallen for the trap. In their eyes, anyone who fell into that hole was finished, and they considered him a fool. What they failed to realize was that Haruchika and Jibril had been teleported away. Instead of falling to their deaths, they appeared inside a room and landed on a bed. Haruchika immediately asked where they were and whether they had successfully escaped. Jibril informed him that they were inside an inn in Kurtelberg. She was relieved that the teleportation had worked in time. Haruchika also felt relieved. The situation had been far too close for comfort, and he thought that work like that would require a dozen lives to survive. Jibril then called out to him and mentioned that she had teleported them at the exact moment they fell into the pitfall, just as he had instructed. Curious, she wondered why he had chosen that method. In her opinion, it would have been much safer to teleport immediately. Haruchika explained that he needed those men to believe that he had died down there. In that moment he had seen it clearly. He had found a way to win Lily over. Back at the guild, there were plenty of customers inside. One table occupied by a group of men was busy talking among themselves. One of them remarked that the previous day had been far too easy, while another believed that only a fool would end up falling into that situation. Their boss scolded them for being too loud, but one of the men even threw the same accusation back at him. Lily overheard their conversation and quietly thought that no one had returned. Even the people and staff inside the guild had started gossiping about the matter. At that moment, someone entered the guild. It was Haruchika. The men who had been talking suddenly froze and struggled to catch their breath when they saw him. Haruchika wondered if anyone was surprised to see him alive, and Jibril confirmed that they were. She also noticed the group sitting at the second table from the front. The number of people matched the group that had attacked them the previous day. Haruchika considered it perfect, and one of the men among them turned out to be the same person who had spoken to him on his first day. Lily called out to Haruchika and welcomed him back. The moment she saw him, tears poured from her eyes. She could not accept him simply acting as though he had returned normally, because she had been worried when he failed to come back the day before. Haruchika apologized, while Lily continued crying, relieved that he was safe. He apologized once again and explained that he had run into a bit of trouble. Looking at him with concern, she checked whether he had been injured. Haruchika assured her that he was completely fine and did not have a single scratch. However, Jibril strongly disagreed and pointed out that he had been hurt. Haruchika ignored the complaint and continued speaking with Lily, explaining that there was something important he needed to report. He asked if he could speak with someone in charge of the guild. Lily became confused, and even the men nearby looked surprised. She wondered if he wanted to speak with the guild master. Haruchika confirmed it, since the matter was serious. Lily understood and asked him to wait for a moment. Despite her emotional reaction, her affection value remained at 0. Haruchika guessed that she had only been worried because she was his assigned handler. Meanwhile, the men sitting in the back spoke nervously among themselves. They wondered what they should do, fearing that Haruchika was about to report them. Their boss tried to reassure them, believing that Haruchika had never seen their faces. As long as they acted normally, there would be no problem. Soon, Lily returned and called for Haruchika. Together, they headed to the guild master's office. The guild master was Master Bonzo, and beside him was his secretary, Amelia. As soon as Haruchika entered, Master Bonzo immediately asked if he was Haruchika. Without wasting time on formalities, the guild master got straight to the point. Haruchika simply noted how forceful Master Bonzo was. Lily apologized on the guild master's behalf, explaining that he was an impatient man. Haruchika then looked directly at Master Bonzo and revealed the reason for his visit. He had come to tell him that Master Bonzo was incompetent. The statement left everyone in the room completely stunned. Master Bonzo remarked that Haruchika certainly had a lot of nerve. With a sharp look, he demanded to know whether Haruchika truly intended to call a man incompetent without a proper reason. Haruchika calmly assured him that, of course, he had a reason. He explained that during the previous day inside the dungeon, he had been attacked by a group of adventurers belonging to the guild. Lily was left shocked, while Master Bonzo merely smirked. From Haruchika's point of view, that meant the guild master could not even keep his own people under control. Master Bonzo argued that such actions were against the rules, but Haruchika himself was also an adventurer. Instead of coming to complain, he should have handled it himself. However, Haruchika immediately cut him off, making it clear that he would never call someone incompetent over something so minor. The real problem was the reason behind the attack. Master Bonzo questioned the reason, believing that it was probably just a robbery or some personal grudge. Haruchika explained that he had only recently arrived and had not made any enemies. A thief would normally target someone known to have money. Raising his voice, he declared that the men were after Lily. Their goal had been to kill the adventurer assigned to her and ruin her reputation by branding her with the name of Nestef. The room fell silent. In Haruchika's mind, that explanation was the only one that made sense. Someone who held a grudge against Lily was trying to destroy her reputation. Master Bonzo quietly turned to his secretary and checked whether the anti-eavesdropping spell was active. Amelia confirmed that it was. Haruchika raised his voice again and pointed out that Master Bonzo himself had brought Lily from the central district. He questioned how many people had already died and whether the guild master understood how much pain all of that had caused her. He challenged how anyone could avoid being called incompetent after allowing such a situation to continue. Lily was left in tears from the shock, and Master Bonzo admitted that he understood Haruchika's argument. However, assuming that the attacker's goal was to disgrace Lily, he questioned what purpose that would ultimately serve. Haruchika scoffed at the question. There was no way he could know such a thing. In his eyes, investigating those matters was the guild master's responsibility. Master Bonzo then became curious and asked whether Haruchika had any leads regarding the culprits. Haruchika answered that he had only one. Hearing that, Master Bonzo immediately moved to have the suspect captured, but Haruchika stopped him. He questioned whether the guildmaster was truly that foolish. His words shocked Lily and angered the secretary. Amelia furiously called him a bastard and moved as though she was about to attack him, declaring that she had heard enough. Master Bonzo stopped her, though Amelia still ended up pointing her knife in his direction. Haruchika explained that the men who attacked him were merely disposable pawns. Even if they were captured and forced to talk, there was no guarantee that the true masterminds behind everything would be revealed. Master Bonzo listened carefully and decided that they would allow the culprits to move freely for the time being while keeping them under surveillance. He then asked Haruchika who was leading them. Haruchika turns to Lily and asked about the name of the man who had bothered him on his first day. Lily believed that it was Sledge, and Master Bonzo immediately recognized the name. Haruchika sat down and moved on to his demands. Until the people behind the attack were captured, he wanted to remain hidden for his own safety. He requested that the guild master prepare a safe house for him. Master Bonzo agreed and informed him that there was a lodge normally used to shelter clients, and Haruchika could stay there. However, Haruchika added another demand. He wanted Lily to attend to his personal needs while he stayed there. Lily gasped at the request, while Amelia immediately became angry. She grabbed Haruchika by the collar and scolded him for pushing his luck too far. In her eyes, he was being stubborn, and once they started closing in on the culprits, Lily herself could end up in danger. Haruchika argued that this was exactly why he intended to protect her. Lily's face turned red, and Master Bonzo questioned how they could know that Haruchika would not try anything inappropriate with her. Haruchika replied that there was no way to prove it. They would simply have to trust him. Master Bonzo then turned his attention to Lily and asked about her opinion. Lily answered that she trusted Haruchika because she was his handler. At that moment, her affection value rose to 30. Master Bonzo called Amelia and ordered her to show Haruchika the way. Amelia opposed the decision, but she had no choice but to obey. Reluctantly, she told Haruchika to follow her. Before leaving, Haruchika stopped and corrected his earlier words. He admitted that Master Bonzo was neither incompetent nor foolish and respectfully bowed to him. The gesture caused Master Bonzo to chuckle. Soon afterward, Haruchika, Lily, and Amelia were on their way to the lodge, riding together on horseback. Amelia noticed Haruchika's fear and pointed out that he could not even ride a horse, mocking him as a pathetic man. Even Jibril remarked that he looked lame, which annoyed Haruchika, causing him to tell her to be quiet. In the world he had come from, there had never been an opportunity to ride horses. Amelia then asked Lily if she was truly comfortable with having a man like him riding behind her. Lily answered that she was. Eventually, they arrived at the place. Haruchika looked around in amazement. The lodge was much nicer than he had expected. Lily lowered her eyes and quietly agreed that it really was a nice place. Amelia proudly remarked that it was only natural for it to be nice. She informed them that there were enough rations to last 10 days and that a well located behind the building provided water. Most of the necessities needed for daily life had already been prepared. Before leaving, Amelia pointed at Haruchika and made one thing perfectly clear. If he ever dared to lay a hand on Lily, the entire guild would hunt him down and kill him. After delivering the warning and making sure he understood, Amelia departed. As Amelia left, Haruchika remarked that she truly hated him. Lily explained that it was because Amelia deeply respected the guildmaster. Hearing that, Haruchika simply understood. First there had been Marion, and now there was Amelia. He guessed that he simply did not get along well with strong-willed women. Lily informed Haruchika that she was going inside to check the place. Without wasting any time, she quickly entered the lodge. At that moment, Jibril remembered something and questioned Haruchika. She pointed out that he always acted like such a nice person and wondered why he had deliberately provoked the guildmaster earlier. Haruchika became confused and noted that Jibril had been acting awfully familiar with him lately. He then explained that the reason was obvious. Everything had been done to get Lily to agree to the idea of the two of them hiding away together. Jibril wondered what else could have convinced her. Haruchika explained that no ordinary person would willingly agree to live alone with a man who was not their lover. Jibril agreed with that. Haruchika went on to explain that when they first entered the guildmaster's office, Lily's affection value had been at 0. There was a psychological principle known as reciprocity. It was the idea that when someone received a favor, they naturally felt obligated to repay it. Because of that, he had first put on a display of anger on Lily's behalf, making her feel indebted to him. That feeling created a sense of obligation within her, causing her to feel the need to repay him for what he had done. Through that, he had managed to make her accept a proposal that would normally have been impossible. Jibril was surprised and wondered whether all of it had been an act. Haruchika replied that, regardless, the stage had already been prepared for winning Lily over. All that remained was for him to make his moves. Meanwhile, after entering the lodge, Lily coughed lightly because the inside was somewhat dusty. She figured that cleaning the place should be their first task. She then entered the bedroom, only to suddenly panic. There was only one bed. Realizing that, she became unsure of what she should do. Lily sat in the bathtub and let out a quiet sigh. She reminded herself that just because she was nervous, she couldn't afford to mess things up right from the start. Earlier, when they were alone together, she had offered to make some tea. While she was preparing it, Haruchika asked if she needed help. The sudden question startled her, causing her to drop the tea maker. She bumped her head, and the coffee ended up spilling over her. Thinking about it made her sigh again as she wondered if Haruchika had been disappointed in her. Even so, there was still a man just on the other side of the door, and yet she was sitting there completely naked. Lily slapped her cheeks lightly, telling herself not to think about it and trying to calm down. Meanwhile, Haruchika drank his tea and thought that Lily at least seemed aware that they were alone together. The real problem now was figuring out how to raise her affection value from that point. Jibril wondered if it would naturally increase if they simply spent more time together, but Haruchika immediately disagreed. He explained the psychological principle of attraction known as the mere exposure effect. Many people misunderstood how it worked. Although repeated exposure could increase fondness, the exposure effect referred to frequency rather than the amount of time spent together. If they simply stayed together for long periods, she might only become accustomed to his presence, causing her affection level to settle without rising or falling. Jibril wondered if the butterfly would eventually disappear, and Haruchika concluded that it would. That was why he needed to take some kind of action. Just then, Lily entered the room and asked about what he meant by doing something. Startled, Haruchika laughed and explained that he had been thinking about the plan he had discussed with the guild master regarding the mastermind. Simply waiting around would not lead anywhere. However, Lily objected, reminding him why they had chosen to stay hidden. Haruchika agreed with her, and Lily lowered her gaze, admitting that she did not want the people under his responsibility to suffer any more because of her. Haruchika told her that he understood. Lily then sat down and asked whether what he had said earlier was true, whether the people assigned to her had really been killed to disgrace her. Haruchika replied that there was no proof yet, but there was a strong possibility. He then asked if anything came to mind. Lily quietly thought about it and concluded that it might be because she was a beastman. Haruchika immediately denied that explanation. He explained that beastmen faced oppression, which was discrimination. It was a terrible thing for those who suffered from it, but when stripped down to its core, discrimination was ultimately based on whether people liked or disliked something. Hearing this, Lily questioned the idea of it simply being about liking or disliking. Haruchika confirmed it. Whether someone liked or disliked beastmen came down to personal preference. Such feelings alone were not enough to create pressure strong enough to make someone risk their own life to murder others. There had to be another reason behind it. Lily listened carefully and wondered what that other reason could be. Haruchika told her that it was fine if nothing came to mind. Serious people often blame themselves for everything, but he assured her that it was not her fault. Malice was born inside another person, and the one who created that malice was the one responsible for it. Lily questioned whether that way of thinking was a bit too extreme. Haruchika reassured her that it was fine, especially for someone like her. Even if she tried her hardest to act selfishly and put herself first, she would only end up being as assertive as an average person. Lily found the idea ridiculous, and Haruchika wondered if he was mistaken. After thinking about it, Lily admitted that he had a point. In the end, the two of them shared a laugh together. Haruchika spoke to Jibril in his mind and asked if she could use wind magic or something similar to dry Lily's hair. Jibril confirmed that she could. After that, Haruchika pointed out that even after changing clothes, Lily's hair was still soaked and that she would catch a cold if she stayed like that. Lily began to insist that it was fine because beastmen were sturdy, but Haruchika cut her off and told her that he would simply use a wind spell to blow away the moisture. However, just as he reached out toward her hair, Lily let out a sharp cry and leaped into the air like a startled cat. Both Haruchika and Jibril were shocked. After landing, Lily quickly apologized. She explained that for beastmen, being touched on the ears or tail was almost the same as an intimate act. Hearing that, Haruchika froze in shock and immediately dropped to his knees, apologizing for his carelessness. But Lily stopped him, insisting that she should be the one apologizing because she knew he had not meant any harm. Even while kneeling, Haruchika heard Jibril calling out to him, informing him that Lily's affection value had just dropped sharply. Haruchika could already see it. He had hoped to earn some points with a little physical contact, but the plan had completely backfired. 20 whole points had vanished in an instant. To a normal human, it would probably have felt as if he had suddenly tried to grab her chest, which meant that going any further would have been far worse. Jibril scolded him and wondered what he planned to do, calling him a pervy master. Haruchika told her to calm down. They had only just started living together, and there were still many things they could do. Lily then changed the topic and asked if there was anything he liked for dinner. Haruchika answered that anything would be fine. Lily mentioned that she had checked earlier, and although the ingredients were all non-perishable, there was plenty of meat, fish, and many other foods available. Haruchika became curious about the refrigerator and assumed that it must be one of those magical tools. Lily explained that Kurtleberg was a port town, so she recommended seafood. Inside his mind, Haruchika knew that this had not been part of the plan, but he felt that he should recover the points he had just lost. After thinking for a moment, he asked if she would allow him to make dinner that night. Lily looked hesitant, and Haruchika explained that a man needed a chance to look cool in front of a girl. Beside him, Jibril looked extremely proud. As expected from her master, she reminded herself that he was also a perfect cook. 30 minutes later, Haruchika presented the fried fish to Lily. It was completely burned. Jibril immediately declared that he had failed, causing Haruchika to act as though he was crying from embarrassment. Lily reassured him that it was alright and tried to find a way to salvage the meal by scraping off the burnt parts. But when she checked more closely, she realized that the fish had turned into charcoal all the way through. Seeing that, Jibril felt slightly relieved. It was nice to know that there was at least something Haruchika could not do well. Haruchika then looked up with a grin. Everything had gone exactly as planned. He sincerely apologized to Lily, admitting that he had only been trying to show off. Jibril stared in surprise, realizing that this had not been a simple failure after all. Haruchika inwardly mocked her, calling her a foolish angel and wondering how she could think he would ever make a mistake. He then told her to look at the affection value. Lily comforted him and reminded him that everyone made mistakes. At that moment, Jibril gasped in surprise when she saw that the affection value had actually risen. She could not understand why it had increased even though he had failed. Haruchika explained that the belief that a man who could cook was attractive was only a myth. When someone possessed cooking skills that rivaled a professional chef, it could actually make a girl feel insecure and sometimes even lead to a breakup. Jibril could hardly believe it and questioned the part about rivaling a professional chef. Haruchika confidently repeated it to himself, reminding her once again that he was a perfect man and that they had already gone over this before. Still unconvinced, Jibril wondered in disbelief whether he was really capable of saying such things about himself. Haruchika explained that if a perfect man served a perfect meal, it could make his partner feel intimidated. In Lily's case especially, his approach had to take her low self-esteem into account. Hearing that, Jibril wondered if he had deliberately failed from the very beginning. Haruchika continued explaining that there was an actual study known as the coffee experiment. According to the results, when a person who appeared competent and well put together accidentally spilled coffee, their likability increased. However, when someone already seen as clumsy spilled coffee, their likability dropped significantly. In other words, for a man as perfect as himself, even failure became part of his charm. By making mistakes, he could create a feeling of familiarity. Jabril could only conclude that it was exactly what she expected from him. More than anything, she found it a little unsettling that he never doubted his own perfection in the slightest. Haruchika became irritated and challenged her, asking if she wanted to start something because he was willing to take her on. Soon, he moved on to the next step and told her to keep watching. Haruchika began acting again, admitting that he could not manage everything by himself after all and asking if she would mind taking care of him. Lily smiled and readily agreed, promising to do her very best. Haruchika expressed how much it helped to have her around. Hearing that made Lily blush, and she modestly brushed it off. From Haruchika's point of view, there had once been a theory that being charmingly dependent made people more popular because it appealed to maternal instincts. That theory eventually led to the idea that the youngest children were often the most popular. A survey involving 1,700 people later confirmed it. Youngest children really were the most popular. Unfortunately, Haruchika was the eldest son. People like him were considered the type least suited to being doted on. Even so, there were moments when someone like him could naturally rely on another person. Immediately after his failure, he had used that failure to slip beneath his partner's own low self-esteem and boldly position himself as someone who needed her support. By doing so, the affection value would continue to rise. At that moment, Lily's affection value had reached 55. Lily soon served the meal on the table. Haruchika was amazed by the dishes before him, and as he began tasting them, Lily watched him with a smile. Later, when they entered the bedroom, Haruchika noticed that there was only one bed. Lily explained that there had only ever been one. Haruchika immediately told her that she could use it while he slept on the floor. Lily disagreed, insisting that such a thing would not be right because a staff member should not receive better treatment than the adventurer. Haruchika argued that even if she said that, he could not allow her to sleep on the floor. Lily hesitated for a moment before suggesting that they simply share the bed. She asked if that would be all right with him. Both Haruchika and Jabril were taken by surprise. Haruchika asked if she was truly certain, and Lily assured him that she trusted him. When bedtime finally arrived, Lily changed into her night clothes while Haruchika had already gotten into bed. Lily excused herself before entering, and Haruchika wished her a good night. Despite being the one who had suggested that they share the bed, Lily felt nervous. There was no way she could simply lie down and fall asleep so easily under those circumstances. Morning arrived, but Lily had not slept well at all. In fact, she had not managed to sleep even for a moment. As she looked at Haruchika sleeping peacefully beside her, she could not help but wonder how he was able to rest so soundly. Gradually, she moved a little closer and found herself questioning whether she was really that unattractive. The thought startled her, and she immediately snapped out of it. Just then, she noticed Haruchika waking up, causing her to panic. Haruchika greeted her with a good morning, and Lily hurriedly returned the greeting before quickly saying that she would go prepare breakfast. With that, she left the room, leaving Haruchika behind. Confused by Lily's strange behavior, Haruchika tried to make sense of it when Jabril suddenly appeared and remarked about how he had managed to sleep so peacefully while sharing a bed with a girl. Haruchika merely sighed and explained that it was only natural. He had perfectly mastered progressive muscle relaxation, a sleep induction method so effective that even the US military used it to help people fall asleep. Jabril sarcastically remarked that it had gone beyond being impressive and had become plain creepy. Haruchika pinched Jabril's cheeks and reminded her that conserving stamina was important. Besides, as long as he could check the results of the experiment after waking up, there was no problem. Jabril asked what experiment he was talking about. Haruchika explained that affection values dropped if the distance between them became too great. He had been curious whether simply staying close to Lily without doing anything would be enough to maintain it. When they checked the current affection value, both Haruchika and Jabril noticed something unexpected. It had risen to 61. Haruchika was certain that it had been 55 the day before. Jabril scolded him, pointing out that it was only natural. Even if he was completely clueless, a normal girl would naturally become conscious of sharing a bed with a man. Haruchika immediately became irritated and questioned whether Jabril had just called him clueless. Jabril simply brushed it off and said whatever she wanted. Changing the subject, she remarked that at this rate, they might be able to raise the affection value even more that day. However, Haruchika disagreed, saying that it probably would not be so simple. When Jabril asked why, Haruchika told her to remember what had happened when they had gone out to eat. Once the affection value had passed 70, it had suddenly become much harder to raise. Jabril asked if that had really happened, causing Haruchika to wonder if she had not noticed. He guessed that the reason was not the curse but rather Lily's personality. In short, she was the kind of person who was friendly but timid when it came to romance. Because she was intelligent, the moment things began developing into genuine romantic feelings, she would start overthinking and lose her nerve. That was simply the kind of person she was. Jabril asked whether there was any way to deal with that. Haruchika answered that there was none, causing Jabril to panic. She could not believe that there was no solution. Haruchika quickly told her not to misunderstand. He only meant that there was no way to raise it all at once. From that point onward, as long as he chose his words carefully and stayed close to her, the affection value would surely continue to rise. Soon after, Haruchika approached Lily and asked if the food in front of them was breakfast. He then thanked her for preparing it. Lily simply answered that it was, while quietly wondering whether he had heard what she had said earlier. The following day, Haruchika and Lily went outside to cut wood. Just as Haruchika had predicted, once the affection value had passed 70, the rate of progress slowed down significantly. From that point onward, the only option was to raise it little by little. The rest depended entirely on conversation. In Haruchika's view, the most important part of talking with a girl was listening, and when speaking, telling stories. Unpopular men tended to focus on logic, but women were more emotionally driven and were not interested in abstract theories or concepts. The worst kind of men were those who always tried to outdo a girl's story. Even if they won the argument, they would only become pathetic losers in the game of love. Girls were not searching for the correct opinion. They simply wanted boys who could empathize with them. Simple responses of agreement and understanding were all that boys really needed to use. If they did that, the affection value would naturally rise. While they were working, Lily suddenly fell silent. Noticing this, Haruchika asked what was wrong. Lily explained that she could hear the sound of hoofs. It sounded like someone was approaching. When they went outside, Haruchika immediately became irritated upon seeing who had arrived. It was Kayla. Kayla told him not to look at her so frighteningly and explained that she was only delivering a message. She had come as a messenger from the guildmaster. After exchanging glances, Haruchika and Lily brought her inside. Lily insisted on preparing some tea. Sitting down, Haruchika asked why Kayla had come instead of the secretary. Kayla explained that Amelia was busy and did not bother traveling all the way there for every small matter. Haruchika observed her carefully. To be blunt, Kayla was the most suspicious person in his eyes. The fact that the guildmaster had assigned her as a messenger only made him think that the man was truly incompetent. Kayla smirked and told him not to stare at her so intensely, especially when she had gone out of her way to bring them good news. Curious, Haruchika asked what the good news was. Kayla informed them that the men who had attacked him had already been identified. That very night, they would be lured out using a fake request. The guildmaster himself intended to capture all of them in one move. Therefore, for confirmation purposes, the guildmaster wanted both Haruchika and Lily to appear at the guild the following afternoon. As she spoke, Kayla even complimented the tea. Lily looked relieved and asked if they were finally safe. Kayla confidently assured them that there was no way the guildmaster would fail. According to her, everything would be settled that very night. Hearing that, Lily let out a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Haruchika calmly drank his tea. Suddenly, Kayla casually asked whether the two of them had already gone all the way. The unexpected question caused Haruchika to spit out his tea, while Lily immediately denied it and insisted that nothing like that had happened. Kayla teasingly questioned whether Haruchika was impotent. The remark instantly irritated Haruchika, causing him to angrily ask who she was calling impotent. Kayla then wondered why they had not done anything, since it was not as though he disliked beastmen. Haruchika argued that it was because Lily was adorable and, honestly, he believed he had done a very good job controlling himself. Even so, he refused to become the kind of scumbag who would take advantage of such circumstances. Kayla burst into laughter and pointed out that if a girl spent days alone with a man inside a cabin like that, no one else would be willing to marry her afterward. She casually remarked on the matter as though she were bragging. Lily and Haruchika were left completely stunned. Kayla continued, wondering whether Haruchika had arranged this entire situation because he wanted to marry Lily. Hearing that, Haruchika immediately stood up and angrily demanded to know how she had arrived at such a conclusion. Kayla also rose to her feet and casually changed the topic. She remarked that they would find out the truth tomorrow after interrogating the men they planned to capture. Having delivered the message she came for, she announced that she was leaving. Before departing, she reminded them once again to show up at the guild the following afternoon. Still irritated, Haruchika told Lily that everything Kayla had said was complete nonsense. Lily agreed with him, but she quietly admitted that it was true that her chances of marriage might disappear now. As Haruchika listened, a thought crossed his mind. If he simply told her that he would marry her, the affection value would probably skyrocket. Instead, Haruchika changed the subject and mentioned that everything would be over tomorrow. Surprisingly, he admitted that he felt a little sad about it. Lily wondered why, and Haruchika explained that he had enjoyed having 3 meals a day, taking naps, and spending time with a cute girl like her. Opportunities like that were not something that came often. Hearing those words, Lily blushed and brushed it off as another one of his jokes. Night eventually arrived, and Haruchika made sure that the door was securely locked. With that done, he felt they were safe. Even if that woman was plotting something, there should be no way for anyone to attack them in their sleep as long as the door remained tightly shut. Jabril agreed with that reasoning. As long as she was not taken down in a single blow, She believed she would still be able to escape even without teleportation. Fresh from the bath, Lily returned, and Haruchika noticed that her affection value had risen to 90. Lily informed him that she had finished bathing and that it was now his turn. Haruchika thought that perhaps they could call this an unexpected blessing. Because Kayla had brought up all that talk about marriage, Lily had begun seeing him in a different light, causing the affection value to rise sharply. Jibril was delighted and remarked that they only needed one final step. Haruchika agreed. Tomorrow morning, once they left the cabin, their time together there would finally come to an end. If Lily felt a sense of loss at that moment, then the affection value would probably reach its maximum. After both of them went to bed, Lily slowly sat up and quietly checked whether Haruchika was still awake. Even Jibril had noticed that Haruchika had fallen asleep in only 2 minutes. Lily moved closer and gently poked his cheeks. She quietly laughed to herself as she noticed how loudly he was sleeping. For her it was a first, not just with a man, but with anyone. She had never stayed that close to another person for such a long time. Being beside him made her feel safe and comfortable. Gradually, she moved even closer to Haruchika and gently held his hand, wishing that she could stay just a little closer for a while. Seeing this, Jibril gasped and quickly shut her eyes. Telling herself that good children should not be watching such things, she decided that she would simply go to sleep. As Lily eventually fell asleep, something strange happened. Her body slowly rose from the bed and began walking out of the cabin barefoot. Deep within the woods, several men were waiting, including the young man from the guild. One of them remarked that he had heard it was a hypnotic sound that only beastmen could hear. Another commented that it worked like a charm. Their leader instructed everyone that once they had Lily tied up, they would leave immediately. However, some of the men asked if they could touch her before they departed. Their boss immediately scolded them and called them idiots. He warned them not to touch the merchandise and ordered them to simply tie her up. At that moment, Jibril urgently called out to Haruchika and forcibly woke him up. Half asleep, Haruchika wondered if it was already morning. Jibril immediately told him that there was no time for that because Lily had disappeared. Haruchika hurriedly jumped out of bed and searched the room. He quickly found Lily's shoes, which told him that she would never have wandered outside barefoot on her own. He immediately asked Jibril if she could sense Lily's location. Jibril tried using her powers, but at the very least, she could not detect Lily's magical energy anywhere nearby. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Haruchika decided that they were heading to the guild and asked Jibril whether she could still teleport. Jibril confirmed that she could. Haruchika clicked his tongue in frustration. They had been so close to reaching the maximum affection value. If they stayed separated for too long, the affection value would begin to decay once again. Because of that, he knew he had to find Lily as quickly as possible. Haruchika and Jibril arrived at the Kurtleberg Adventurers Guild. Looking around, Haruchika asked Jibril if she could sense any sign of the man who had attacked him before. Jibril replied that there was nothing. From a distance, Kayla spotted him and wondered why he had arrived so quickly. From the cabin, it should have taken him an entire day to get there. Deciding that she would simply act normally, she maintained her composure. Haruchika marched straight toward Kayla and angrily slammed his hand on her desk, demanding to know where she had taken Lily. Without showing any sign of nervousness, Kayla acted confused and questioned what he meant by taking her anywhere. Pretending not to understand, she pointed out that Lily had not been with her. Haruchika grabbed her by the collar and angrily accused her of playing dumb. Kayla immediately raised her voice as well and declared that anyone who resorted to violence inside the guild would be banned from the premises. She began calling out to the customers around them, urging everyone to seize the troublemaker. Several people were about to move against Haruchika when a voice suddenly stopped them and called them idiots for interfering. The one who appeared was Master Bonzo. Calling Haruchika a brat, he asked why he was there and what had happened to Lily. Haruchika immediately pointed at Kayla and accused her of kidnapping Lily. He insisted that she had arranged everything. Hearing such a serious accusation, Master Bonzo reacted with surprise. Amelia suggested that they continue the discussion somewhere private. Agreeing with that, Master Bonzo ordered Haruchika and Kayla to accompany him to his office. Once inside, Master Bonzo scolded Haruchika. He reminded him that he had entrusted Lily to him because Haruchika had promised to protect her no matter what, and now the situation had turned into a complete mess. Haruchika admitted that he had no excuse. Master Bonzo then asked him about his claim that Kayla had aided the criminals and set everything up. Unable to stay quiet, Kayla immediately defended herself and insisted that Haruchika was making things up. Master Bonzo cut her off and reminded her that he had not been speaking to her. Haruchika explained that Kayla had visited the cabin the previous afternoon. According to him, she had delivered a message claiming that Master Bonzo wanted them to come to the guild around noon that day. Master Bonzo frowned and stated that he had no memory of sending such a message. Kayla quickly defended herself once again. She argued that this was exactly why she had said Haruchika was lying. According to her, she had never gone to any cabin. She even accused Haruchika of trying to frame her and of running away with Lily for his own purposes. Furious, Haruchika immediately fought back against those accusations and condemned her lies. Master Bonzo suddenly raised his voice and ordered both of them to be silent. He declared that the truth would be revealed soon enough. Reaching into his desk, Master Bonzo took out a magic ball. The sphere began displaying the events that had taken place at the cabin. Seeing this, Kayla became visibly uneasy as she realized that it was a surveillance magical tool. Master Bonzo explained that because the cabin was specifically used to hide and protect people, it had been equipped with surveillance magic. However, he could only view footage from the previous day. Master Bonzo asked Kayla whether the person shown in the footage, watching Lily leave the cabin, was indeed her. It was obvious that Lily was somehow being controlled. Amelia looked at Kayla and told her not to waste time with pointless excuses. Regardless of what the footage showed, Amelia had already intended to arrest her that day. Hearing that, Kayla panicked. Amelia explained that identifying the group that had attacked Haruchika in the dungeon had been easy, since all of them were adventurers under her supervision. However, the deeper she investigated, the more crimes she uncovered. There had been falsified subjugation records and inflated reward claims. Amelia admitted that she was honestly impressed that Kayla had managed to hide everything for so long. Realizing she had been exposed, Kayla attempted to escape, but Amelia caught her before she could get away. Amelia questioned whether she truly thought she could run. Haruchika shouted and demanded to know where Lily was, forcing Kayla to answer. However, Kayla coldly responded that it was already too late. According to her, they should have been reaching the border of the neighboring country, Novark, by then. Since the slave trade was legal in Novark, even if anyone pursued them, Lily would have already been sold as a slave. Immediately, Master Bonzo ordered Amelia to request support from the guilds in the towns near the border. Since there was only one road leading to Novark, he instructed her to have it blocked off and declared that he would take full responsibility. Kayla laughed and insisted that they would never make it in time. In response, Amelia pushed her face harder against the floor and angrily ordered her to be quiet while calling her a bitch. Without wasting another second, Haruchika and Jibril hurried out of the guild. Master Bonzo called out to them and asked where they were going. Once outside, Haruchika immediately asked Jibril if she could do it. Jibril assured him that she could. As long as she knew their general location, it would be enough. After several seconds, she successfully located them. They would teleport. Meanwhile, the adventurers escorting Lily were traveling toward Novark. One of them called out to Lily and informed her that they were almost at the border. Once they handed her over to the slave trader in Novark, they would be saying their goodbyes. Lily desperately cried out for help. One of the adventurers stared at her and remarked that she still had a defiant look in her eyes. He called out to the boss and asked if he could teach her a lesson. The boss reminded him that Lily was merchandise and warned him not to leave any marks. With a grin, the adventurer reached out and began pulling down Lily's shirt, exposing her chest. Although she struggled and tried to resist, she was unable to do anything. At that very moment, Haruchika and Jibril arrived. Jibril quickly informed him that the carriage ahead was the one they were looking for and that she could sense Lily's presence inside. She asked whether they should simply charge in, and Haruchika agreed. However, he realized that Lily's affection value had probably dropped considerably. To raise it all at once, there was only one option left. Jibril was confused and wondered what he meant. She then realized what he was planning and questioned whether he could really do it. Haruchika admitted that he did not want to do it either, but he had no choice. In the end, Jibril reluctantly accepted it and reassured herself that whatever happened afterward would not be her fault. Jibril released her grip on Haruchika, and he dropped perfectly into the carriage. The sudden appearance left everyone inside completely stunned. Just as Jibril had sensed, there were 4 people inside the carriage along with 2 drivers. Lily was sitting in the back, and there was one more set of feet belonging to the driver. The moment Haruchika landed inside, he immediately removed the tape covering Lily's mouth. One of the adventurers shouted in surprise and demanded to know where he had come from. As the man prepared to strike him, Haruchika moved first and attacked immediately, sending the adventurer flying out of the carriage. Turning toward the others, Haruchika noticed the disbelief written on their faces. He then looked at Lily and apologized for arriving late. At that moment, her affection value had dropped all the way to 72. It had fallen quite a bit. Another adventurer rushed toward him, ready to attack. However, Haruchika could judge their skill level simply by looking at their stance. He effortlessly knocked them down. Compared to opponents like Marion and Dean McAllister, these men were nothing more than small fry. Haruchika then turned to Lily and prepared to untie her. But before he could do so, the leader of the adventurers had already moved behind him. Lily desperately tried to warn him, but the boss attacked first. The blow sent Haruchika flying out of the carriage. Seeing that, Lily panicked and became frightened. The boss laughed and looked at her, claiming that Haruchika was dead. He brought up the nickname Miss Death. and repeated the rumors that every adventurer who teamed up with her eventually died. Tears filled Lily's eyes as she questioned how anyone could be so cruel. The boss pointed at her and told her not to blame him. According to him, if Lily had never become involved with Haruchika, he would not have died. He placed all the blame on her and insisted that it was entirely her fault. Lily desperately denied it. She refused to believe it and could only think that such words were horrible. The boss stepped closer and tried to calm her down. Once she was sold into slavery, she would be finished with adventurers forever. In that case, no one would ever call her Miss Deathlin. Suddenly, another voice interrupted him, declaring that no one would be allowed to call her Miss Death anymore. The boss froze in surprise and turned toward the source of the voice. Before he could even react, Haruchika's kick struck him squarely in the face and sent him flying out of the carriage. Lily stared in shock. Haruchika reminded her of the promise he had made, the promise that he would never die. Upon seeing him safe, Lily burst into tears and tightly embraced him. Overcome with relief, she held onto him as Haruchika gently patted her head and apologized. Jibril happily announced that Lily's affection had already reached its maximum, meaning the second target had been successfully cleared. She then reflected on how Haruchika had intentionally told her to let him throw himself in the carriage so she could catch him. She couldn't help but think that her master truly kept his angel constantly busy. The carriage suddenly came to a stop, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Jibril quickly flew ahead to investigate and soon informed them that one of the criminals had managed to escape. Haruchika tried to stand up, but Lily stopped him and pleaded with him not to go. She begged him not to do anything dangerous anymore, and Haruchika agreed. Haruchika realized that he had frightened her after all, though he felt it could not be helped. He figured that the guild probably already had the escaped man's face and name on record, so the fugitive would not get very far. His thoughts then shifted to another problem. He had no idea how to drive a carriage, leaving him unsure how they would get back from there. Jibril called out to Haruchika and informed him that adventurers from a neighboring city, dispatched at the guildmaster's request, were already heading toward their location. Hearing that, Haruchika decided that waiting for them was their best option. Jibril then said that she would keep the horse calm so it would not run away. She also planned to put the men Haruchika had knocked unconscious into a deep sleep. Haruchika thanked her. A moment later, Lily softly called his name. When Haruchika looked at her and wondered what was wrong, Lily struggled to explain because she found it difficult to say. She finally admitted that she thought her heat cycle might have started. Haruchika was confused at first, but then he suddenly panicked. Lily explained that it was the first time it had ever happened to her. She added that her face felt hot, her heart was beating incredibly fast, and that was why she believed it had begun. Haruchika asked what that meant if it really was the case. Lily explained that if they did that kind of thing during a heat cycle, pregnancy would be guaranteed. Hearing that, Haruchika became uneasy. Lily confirmed that the chance was 100%. Haruchika could only let out an awkward laugh. Lily then added a purely hypothetical question. If they were to have a baby, she wondered what kind of male-to-female ratio he would prefer. Haruchika was confused by the question and tried to understand what she meant. Lily explained that around 6 babies were usually born at once. Haruchika was stunned as he realized they would instantly become a large family. Lily added that they would be born in about 60 days. Unable to hold herself back any longer, Lily leaned against Haruchika. She pressed her body close to his and rested her chest against his face while Haruchika tried to calm her down. Haruchika quietly noticed how soft they were and immediately realized that this was bad, very bad. Lily mentioned that she could smell his male scent. At that moment, Jibril remarked that it was still too early for anyone to lose control and reminded Haruchika that they first needed to get back home, since the mission would not be over until they returned safely. Jibril simply stood there watching the situation unfold. Haruchika urged her to do something instead of just standing there. Jibril quickly responded and cast a spell on Lily. Almost immediately, Lily calmed down and stopped making any moves as Jibril gently put her to sleep for the time being. Haruchika told Jibril that she had saved him. He admitted that he had never imagined maxing out Lily's affection meter would lead to something like this. He also realized that Lily had become like a completely different person. Feeling relieved, Haruchika pointed out that this meant the second target had been successfully cleared. Jibril confirmed it and explained that once they delivered Lily back to the guild, they should head for the next target. Haruchika hoped the next one would be a little easier, while Jibril believed that it probably would be. She then informed him that the next target was a sister serving at the cathedral in the Amalia Holy Land. Her name was Anais Martin. Haruchika felt that the assignment sounded rather stiff and did not seem like the romantic type at all. Jibril reminded him that Anais was a sister who served the goddess. Hearing that, Haruchika immediately took back what he had said. Completely exhausted, Haruchika asked Jibril to wake him once the escort arrived. Jibril agreed, and just then the goddess appeared through a portal and pinched Jibril's face. After that, Haruchika and Lily peacefully fell asleep for a while. With the help of the adventurers Bonzo had dispatched, they safely returned to Kurtleberg around noon the following day. By the time Lily woke up, she had completely recovered from her heat cycle. However, she apologized so intensely that it almost looked as though she would bury herself into the ground, creating another difficult situation of its own. Later, Bonzo praised Haruchika for his good work. Haruchika felt that he should be the one expressing gratitude, thanking Bonzo for arranging the adventures and everything else. Bonzo made it clear that Haruchika should not flatter himself, since he had done it for Lily, not for him. He also revealed that the one who had escaped had already been captured. Every one of them had been secured, including Kayla, and they would all be handed over to the local lord for sentencing. Their punishment was almost certainly going to be the death penalty. Bonzo further explained that since the criminals were not listed as wanted, he could not guarantee there would be any bounty. Even so, although he was not offering it as compensation, he decided to promote Haruchika to iron rank. Haruchika accepted the promotion and thanked him without showing much emotion. At that point, Amelia raised her voice at Haruchika, criticizing his attitude and pointing out how disrespectful he was after everything Master Bonzo had done for him. Bonzo then stepped in and told her to calm down. Master Bonzo then revealed that, now that Haruchika had become an iron rank adventurer, there was actually a job he wanted to assign to him. Haruchika was surprised by the sudden offer. Feeling completely worn out from the day, he thought it would be better to discuss it tomorrow. Jibril agreed, reminding him that they also had to meet their next target. Master Bonzo told Haruchika not to be so cautious. He explained that this was not the kind of job that came along every day. It was an escort mission for the Saints. Hearing that, Jibril remarked that the timing was strangely convenient. Bonzo explained that a sister who had recently received the goddess's blessing was traveling from the Holy Land to the cathedral in the royal capital. The Saintess was scheduled to pass through Kurtleberg the following day, and the mission was to join her entourage and escort her safely all the way to the capital. Haruchika found it strange and pointed out that the Saintess already had an escort. Bonzo explained that it was a matter of trust, since the church was quite rotten on the inside. Haruchika could not help but think that it suited the kind of goddess they worshipped. Jibril immediately reminded him that such a remark would earn him a scolding. Bonzo went on to explain that not everyone welcomed the newly appointed Saintess. According to the information he had received, there was no telling where an assassin might be hiding. One of the priests traveling with the Saintess happened to be an old friend of Bonzo's, and he had specifically requested someone trustworthy and skilled to join the escort. That was the reason for the request. Haruchika found it hard to believe that Bonzo considered him the trustworthy person for the job. Bonzo then admitted that there was another reason as well. He could not afford to have Lily quitting her job just to get married, so keeping the most likely cause of that possibility at a distance for a while was also part of his thinking. Hearing that, Haruchika became furious and realized that this might have been the real reason all along. Bonzo simply urged him to accept the job and escort the Saintess, Anais Martin, to the cathedral in the royal capital. He assured Haruchika that it was an easy mission. Meanwhile, inside an elegant carriage, someone informed the Saintess that they should arrive in Kurtleberg by the following day. The Saintess responded with a warm smile and expressed her appreciation for the hard work. However, the pleasant expression quickly disappeared. She let out a sigh, complained that the whole trip was a nuisance, and grumbled at her but hurt. This young woman was the Saintess, Anais Martin. Meanwhile, inside the guildmaster's room, Bonzo's old friend arrived and asked Haruchika whether he had already heard the details of the request. Haruchika confirmed that he had, at least the part about it being an escort mission for the Saintess. The priest offered a handshake, and Haruchika introduced himself as an iron rank adventurer. The priest then introduced himself as Bengler, a priest of the Amalia Church. Bonzo remarked that there was no need for everyone to be so stiff. He explained that although Bengler looked like a serious and strict man now, the two of them had gotten into all kinds of trouble together in their younger days. Bengler asked Bonzo to spare him, reminding him that he now had a position to uphold. Bonzo laughed loudly and simply invited him to take a seat. As Bengler sat down, he quietly noted that Bonzo had not changed one bit. Bengler then explained that the previous month, the former Saintess, Lady Karina, had been called to heaven in the royal capital. After her passing, the goddess's blessing descended upon Sister Anais of the Holy Land Church, making her the new Saintess. Haruchika quietly turned his attention toward Jibril, realizing that it was the goddess who had blessed Anais. Bonzo mentioned that Haruchika was not from this country and asked Bengler to explain how the church worked. Bengler acknowledged that Haruchika had come from another land. According to Bengler, the church was far from united. There was an ongoing power struggle between the bishops of the churches in the royal capital and the bishops of the Holy City Church. Whenever a new Saintess was chosen, a new archbishop was also selected, and the person responsible for choosing that archbishop was the newly appointed Saintess herself. In other words, if someone from the Holy City Church, such as Bengler, were chosen as archbishop, the faction in the royal capital would not be pleased. Bangler confirmed that this was exactly the situation and recognized that Haruchika was quite perceptive. Haruchika then wondered whether people would truly go as far as trying to kill the Sanctus. Bangler confirmed that they would. There could only be one Sanctus in each generation, and if Anais were to die, the goddess would bestow her blessing upon a new Sanctus. Bangler further explained that there was a chance the next Sanctus could come from the royal capital, and that was exactly the reason behind the danger. Haruchika compared it to re-rolling the Sanctus and even questioned whether the goddess was sane. Bangler continued by saying that, under those circumstances, there was no way of knowing where an assassin might be hiding. Haruchika then considered what he would do if he were on the royal capital church's side. Bonzo commented that Haruchika hardly seemed like the kind of person who would worship the goddess in the first place. Haruchika agreed with that assessment and admitted that if the goddess had not been a woman, he would have punched her in the face. Jibril was taken aback by the remark, while Bangler, Bonzo, and Amelia were equally surprised to hear those words come from him. Bonzo remarked that, for this particular job, someone as irreverent as Haruchika might actually be more reassuring. Haruchika then wondered if Bonzo was truly certain he was the right person for the mission, because it felt like something far beyond his abilities. Bonzo admitted that if it were only a matter of strength, that might be true. However, he believed Haruchika possessed courage as well, and he had risked himself to save Lily. Those were the qualities Bonzo valued most in him. Haruchika felt that Bonzo was giving him far too much credit. He then asked whether he would be riding in the Sanctus's carriage. Bangler explained that he would not. The carriage was reserved exclusively for the Sanctus, and they wanted Haruchika to travel on horseback instead. Haruchika admitted that he actually did not know how to ride a horse. Quietly, he began thinking that he would need to come up with another way to stay close to the Sanctus. Bonzo let out a sigh and remarked that Haruchika truly was a hopeless brat. He then called for Amelia and ordered her to accompany Haruchika. Amelia was caught off guard by the order and immediately objected. She was about to explain that she had duties to fulfill by Bonzo's side, but Bonzo cut her off and informed her that Lily would take over those responsibilities instead, leaving her with nothing to worry about. Although Amelia was visibly frustrated, she had no choice but to accept the decision. She then turned toward Haruchika and told him not to glare at her. Haruchika quietly thought that he did not want this arrangement either. He then asked when they would be leaving. Bangler explained that the Sanctus was attending a ceremony at the church in Kurtelberg that day, and their departure was scheduled for early the following morning. Haruchika understood that the Sanctus would only be staying for one day and felt that the schedule was rather rushed. Bangler explained that they had run into trouble when they first set out, causing their schedule to fall behind. Haruchika became curious about what kind of trouble it had been, but Bangler only responded with a smile. Haruchika realized from that reaction that Bangler had no intention of talking about it. Bangler then explained that the only people close to the Sanctus during the journey would be himself and the sister serving as her attendant. Therefore, there should be no problem keeping everyone else away from her. Haruchika then asked how large the entire escort group was. Bangler answered that there were 30 people in total. Among them were 7 holy knights dispatched by the royal capital church. Haruchika immediately realized that those 7 knights could also become enemies. He asked Bangler if that was what he was implying, and Bangler quietly nodded. Haruchika understood the situation and could only think that the goddess never seemed to bring anything good. The following day, Amelia sighed repeatedly as she prepared to accompany Haruchika. She blamed him for forcing her to leave her master's side. Haruchika insisted that it was not his fault, but Amelia argued that none of this would have happened if he had simply known how to ride a horse. After calming herself, Amelia admitted that, despite everything, it was true that among everyone currently at the guild, Haruchika was the most suitable person for this mission. She immediately clarified her statement, making it clear that he should not misunderstand. The one she was praising was her master's judgment, not Haruchika himself. Haruchika simply accepted that. Knowing that they would be partners during this mission, Haruchika decided that he might as well check Amelia's status. He had no intention of being stabbed in the back by an ally. When her status appeared, he saw that Amelia's current affection level toward him was 21. Haruchika was genuinely surprised that it was unexpectedly high. He wondered why it had reached that level and even considered whether Amelia might be at Sundra. In the end, he confidently convinced himself that it was only natural. After spending time around him, he believed that falling for him was simply unavoidable. Nearby, Bangler called out to Haruchika and Amelia, mentioning that they had arrived early and offering to introduce them to the Sanctus if they wished. Haruchika agreed, but before they could leave, someone called out to him. When he turned around, he saw Lily running toward him, breathing heavily. She explained that as soon as she heard Haruchika was leaving that day, she had rushed over as fast as she could. Haruchika thanked her. Lily then reached out and gently held both of his hands. She asked him to be careful and told him that she would be waiting for his return. She also expressed her hope that, once he came back, Haruchika would accompany her to the north. Curious, Haruchika wondered why they would go there. With some hesitation, Lily revealed that she wanted him to meet her parents. Haruchika found himself unable to respond properly. At that moment, Amelia interrupted, wondering how much longer they intended to keep flirting. Realizing that she was still holding Haruchika's hands, Lily quickly let go and apologized. Bangler then announced that he would guide them to the Sanctus. Haruchika bid Lily farewell, while Lily decided that she would properly see him off. As they walked, Bangler explained that throughout the journey, the Sanctus would travel in her own private carriage. The carriage was sturdily built and reinforced with holy magic, making it relatively safe. However, the moments when she stepped outside the carriage, such as during stops at lodging sites, would be when she was at her most vulnerable. Amelia acknowledged the explanation. When they reached the carriage, Bangler called out to the Sanctus and informed her that Haruchika and Amelia had arrived and would be serving as her escorts. The Sanctus expressed her gratitude for their efforts, and as she stepped out, she apologized for causing them the trouble of escorting her all the way to the capital. Haruchika immediately checked her status. It displayed her skills, including healing and intimidation, while her affection level toward him was at 0. However, what caught his attention the most was the title displayed before him. It identified her as a false Sanctus. Haruchika could hardly believe that it stated so plainly that she was a false Sanctus. Jibril quietly remarked that it did seem to make sense. As far as she remembered, the woman who had actually received the goddess's blessing was named Ricotta Liebfrau. To Haruchika, whether she was the true Sanctus or a false one made little difference. She was still his assigned target, and he decided that he would play the role of a cool and dependable knight. As he bent down in a respectful gesture, Haruchika expressed his wish for her well-being and his resolve to risk his life to protect her. To his surprise, the moment he did so, her affection value immediately dropped to -20. Amelia raised her voice at Haruchika, wondering why he was spacing out. Haruchika explained that he had simply been captivated by the Sanctus's beauty, which only made Amelia even more annoyed. She assured him that, if the need ever arose, she would personally dispose of that womanizer herself. Haruchika could not help but wonder why the escort was the one being threatened instead. Amelia immediately cut him off and ordered him to be quiet because it was time to leave. As the two of them departed, the Sanctus quietly muttered that he was a damn scumbag. Haruchika was left wondering why. From his perspective, their exchange had been completely harmless, yet her affection value had suddenly dropped by 20 points. He began thinking about what could have caused such a reaction. One possibility that came to mind was that the false Sanctus might have some kind of trauma involving men. Jibril admitted that such a possibility could not be ruled out. However, under normal circumstances, the Sanctus was supposed to become the mother of one of the members of the hero's party. Even so, Haruchika remained confident. He treated it as another situation that would require the usual trial and error. Amelia then called out to him, asking what he had been muttering about and reminding him that they were setting out. As they climbed onto their horses, Amelia warned Haruchika that she would not allow him to cheat on Lily. If he ever did anything that made Lily cry, she would personally finish him off. To make her point clear, she aimed her dagger toward him. Haruchika then asked Jibril when Lily's memories, along with everyone else's, would be erased. Jibril explained that it would happen as soon as they had left Kurtulberg. However, erasing Amelia's memories at that moment would create inconsistencies, so Amelia's memories would only be erased after Anais had been safely escorted to the royal capital. Before departing, Amelia felt relieved after seeing her master and the others one last time. Haruchika looked at them as well and quietly decided that this arrangement was fine with him. As their journey began, Amelia informed Haruchika that they would soon arrive at the campsite where they would be staying for the night. Haruchika felt relieved and admitted that his butt had been hurting so much that he had reached his limit. Amelia immediately raised her voice again, making it clear that she could not care less about his sore butt. What truly mattered, she reminded him, was securing the area so the Sanctus could safely enter the inn. Haruchika acknowledged her point and told her not to get so worked up. As they traveled through the streets, many people called out to the Sanctus. Amelia warned Haruchika not to let his guard down, while the Sanctus smiled warmly and waved to the people through the carriage window. The crowd was delighted to see the Sanctus. Watching the scene, Haruchika realized that she was certainly popular. Amelia remarked that she had thought he was merely an idiot, but now she was convinced he truly was one. To her, the reason was obvious. Of course the Sanctus was popular, because she was the Sanctus. Haruchika quietly muttered that it was hard to believe what Amelia had said when the one giving the blessing was that useless goddess. Jibril admitted that she understood how he felt, but reminded him that the goddess was still technically a deity and asked him to show her at least a little respect. Haruchika immediately dismissed the idea. To him, there was not a single thing about the goddess that deserved any respect. As they reached their destination, the carriage came to a stop. Amelia climbed down from her horse and instructed the priest to take care of the horses. She then urged Haruchika to stop dawdling and come along. Haruchika quickly followed, and the two of them knelt before the carriage. Haruchika realized that this would probably be his only opportunity to approach Anais that day, so he decided to make his move. He politely stepped forward and offered to open the carriage door for the Saintess. As Anais stepped out, Haruchika was convinced that there was not a single girl alive who disliked being treated like a princess. He then offered his hand to assist her. However, the Saintess refused the gesture, deciding that it would not be necessary, and simply walked past him. Jibril was surprised to see the Saintess's affection value immediately fall to -40. Amelia then guided the Saintess toward the inn, and the Saintess expressed her gratitude to Amelia. Meanwhile, Haruchika remained where he was, stunned and embarrassed. Jibril quietly remarked that the situation had been embarrassing. Haruchika asked her not to make it any worse. Amelia opened the door, called Haruchika useless, and told him that he could simply go and rest at the inn. After that she slammed the door shut. Haruchika then asked Jibril if they should head to the inn as well. Jibril quickly agreed. Before leaving, Haruchika briefly turned his attention toward the nearby knights, who noticed him looking at them. That night, Haruchika buried himself in the soft bed. Frustrated, he kept wondering what was wrong with that false Saintess. Jibril admitted that even from her perspective, she could not understand why the Saintess's affection value had dropped so drastically. Haruchika agreed, pointing out that he had only tried to treat her a little more politely than usual. Either way, with so few chances to interact with her, he could not even find a clue about the reason. Throughout their stay, Amelia handled the Saintess's escort duties because they were both women. Haruchika realized that his only real opportunities to approach Anais would be when she got into or out of the carriage. With that in mind, Haruchika decided that he would simply continue making small attempts for a while and carefully observe how she reacted each time. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Claudia excused herself and left the Saintess alone. After expressing her appreciation to Claudia, Anais removed part of her Saintess attire and lay down on the bed, unable to hide how tired she was of keeping up the act. Her thoughts soon drifted to Haruchika, and her irritation immediately returned. Remembering the gesture he had made earlier, she could only think of him as a disgusting and filthy man. Anais then realized that the moment people discovered she was a fake, they would completely change the way they treated her anyway. She rolled over on the bed, her expression growing downcast as she quietly wondered how she had ended up in such a situation. 1 week later, the escort party arrived at Kaluga Gorge. They continued escorting the Saintess toward the royal capital. Haruchika could hardly believe that an entire week had already passed, yet he had not made even a millimeter of progress. Jibril pointed out that, rather than making progress, the Saintess clearly hated him even more now. Realizing that, Haruchika let out a weary sigh. Jibril then came up with an idea. She wondered if the affection value might eventually flip around the way Marian's had if it kept dropping. Haruchika pointed out that Marian's situation had only worked because he had known exactly how to make it flip. This time, he did not even know why the Saintess's affection value kept decreasing. Jibril then asked if he was actually feeling depressed. Haruchika admitted that, although he did not want to admit it, he really was. At that moment, Amelia called out to him. She informed Haruchika that they had entered Kaluga Gorge. If they were attacked there, the situation would become dangerous, so she reminded him not to let his guard down. Looking down at the narrow road ahead, they recognized it as the most difficult route in the country. At the same time, its narrow path and lack of blind spots also made it seem relatively safe. Amelia remarked that, as expected, no one would choose to attack in a place like that. The only exception would be people who did not care whether they lived or died. Almost as soon as those words crossed her mind, rocks began falling onto the road ahead. Without warning, an enormous boulder crashed directly into the carriage carrying the Saintess. The impact shoved the carriage violently, sending it crashing onto the road. The Saintess cried out in alarm, and everyone around her was thrown into panic. Amelia desperately called out for the Saintess. Without a moment of hesitation, Haruchika steadied himself and leaped forward, determined to become the hero who would save her. After the carriage crashed, Haruchika caught Anais in his arms. Letting out a sigh of relief, he realized just how close the situation had been. His thoughts drifted back to the moment before the fall. Anais had still been trapped inside the carriage, and Haruchika had urgently asked Jibril if there was anything she could do. Jibril admitted that she could not. There was no way she would make it in time. As he fell, Haruchika desperately searched for a way to save Anais from inside the carriage, forcing himself to think despite the danger. Then a falling log slammed into the carriage, causing it to plummet even faster. To Haruchika's surprise, Anais was thrown out of the carriage. He immediately called out to Jibril, telling her that Anais had come out. Jibril instantly understood what needed to be done and rushed forward to catch her. After everything settled, Haruchika let out a relieved sigh, grateful that they had managed to save Anais. He could only imagine what would have happened if she had remained trapped inside the carriage. Jibril pointed out that Anais had been quite heavy to carry and remarked that Haruchika should properly thank her. Haruchika admitted that she was right and acknowledged that it was all thanks to her. Jibril became noticeably flustered and found herself unsure how to react whenever Haruchika suddenly became sincere like that. Haruchika simply thought that she could be such a pain sometimes. Soon afterward, he realized that he had not seen the coachman anywhere. Jibril agreed. She explained that she had been unable to save the horses, and as for the coachman, she had looked around but could not find him. Haruchika carefully thought it through. The coachman was not lying at the bottom of the cliff. If that was the case, then perhaps he had escaped back to the top before the carriage fell. That realization led Haruchika to another conclusion. If the coachman had managed to escape beforehand, then he must have known the attack was coming in advance. Looking toward the top of the cliff, Jibril asked what they should do next. She explained that she could carry only one person at a time back up the cliff. Haruchika refused. Instead, he realized that this situation was actually an opportunity. Their real goal was not simply to escort the false saintess safely to the royal capital. Their objective was to win her over and restore her feelings of love. Jibril admitted that he had a point. Haruchika continued by pointing out that, at that moment, the only people there were himself and the false saintess. That also meant he was the only person she could rely on. Jibril could not help but think that his reasoning sounded incredibly scummy. Haruchika insisted that he had no hidden motives. He believed that traveling to the royal capital together under those circumstances would naturally strengthen the bond between them. Facing hardships and overcoming difficulties side by side would create what he considered the shared hardship effect. He further explained that by cooperating with each other, Anaisa's perception of him would gradually change until she began seeing him as a dependable companion. On top of that, he expected the cooperation effect to work in his favor as well. Haruchika realized that the attackers probably believed they had successfully assassinated Anais. From his perspective, however, their actions had practically turned into an unexpected assist. Still, if the coachman had truly been working from the inside, then it would not be surprising if other assassins had also been mixed in with the escort group. Haruchika found himself worried about Amelia, but he believed she was skilled enough to handle herself. For the moment, he decided that his priorities should be the situation in front of him. Just then, Anais suddenly woke up with a gasp. She immediately sat up in panic and became suspicious of Haruchika, assuming he might have been planning to assault her while she was unconscious. She also made it clear that he should not look down on her simply because she was a woman. An awkward silence followed between them. After a brief moment, Anais suddenly changed her attitude as she realized that her behavior had been rather unbecoming. She admitted that she had gotten just a little carried away. Watching her sudden change in demeanor, Haruchika quietly wondered if the personality she had just shown was actually the false saintess's true self. After the two of them sat down to rest, Haruchika asked Anais whether she had been injured. Anais replied that she was fine, though she wondered what had happened. Haruchika explained that they had been attacked and that the carriage had fallen down the cliff. Anais remarked that it was remarkable they had both survived. Haruchika suggested that it must have been thanks to the goddess's divine protection bestowed upon her. Anais accepted that explanation. Anais then stood up and insisted that they needed to hurry and reunite with the others. She believed that the priest must already be worried about her. Haruchika pointed out that such a plan was impossible. There was no way they could climb a cliff that steep. Instead, they would have to make their own way to the royal capital. Anais became concerned and wondered if that meant they would be traveling on foot. Haruchika confirmed that they would. He then assured her that he would become the shield protecting her noble self and would escort her safely to the royal capital no matter what. Anais fell silent for a moment before finally accepting his words. At that exact moment, Jibril was stunned to see Anais's affection value plummet all the way to -90. Even so, Haruchika remained confident. He remarked that he now mostly understood the situation. Curious, Jibril asked what he meant, but Haruchika simply told her to keep watching. Haruchika then admitted to Anais that everything he had just said had only been an excuse. He confessed that he did not worship the goddess, nor did he feel any special gratitude toward the saintess. Protecting her was simply his job, and because of that, he had no choice but to do it. He also made it clear that she should not expect too much from him. Anais smiled, noticing how suddenly his attitude had changed. Haruchika explained that it was because the noisy one was no longer around. To him, Anais was simply a high-maintenance girl. Whether she was a saintess or not made no difference to him. Anais's expression shifted as she remarked that he had said quite an extraordinary thing. At that moment, Jibril noticed that Anais's affection value had risen from -90 to -88. She immediately pointed out that it had actually increased. Anais then brought up Haruchika's earlier statement that he would simply treat her according to the amount he was being paid. Haruchika pointed out that it was not Anais's money paying him anyway. As far as he was concerned, he would only do as much work as he was being paid to do. With that settled, he turned around and prepared to move on. Before they could leave, Anais stopped him. At that moment, Jibril informed Haruchika that Anaisa's affection value had increased once again. Even though Haruchika had treated her so bluntly, the number had still gone up. Jibril could not understand why it had increased. Haruchika concluded that the answer was simple. Anais was an imposter. Jibril was confused by what he meant by that. Haruchika explained that people often found comfort in environments that felt familiar to them. On the other hand, even being treated better than they believed they deserved could make them feel uneasy. He continued by explaining that this was a psychological state in which someone experienced overwhelming stress when treated in a way they believed was beyond their own standing. It was known as imposter syndrome. Considering Anaisa's earlier behavior, along with her difficult upbringing and her situation as a false saintess, Haruchika judged that she had been living under extreme stress in that environment. As Haruchika looked at Anais, her affection value rose once again. Even so, although it was increasing, the speed at which it rose was unusually slow. Jibril agreed with the observation. When the affection value had dropped before, it had fallen in chunks of 10 points at a time. Marian's affection had never increased to begin with, while Lily's had risen only to fall again immediately afterward. Because of that, Haruchika had originally suspected that the false saintess had also been placed under some kind of curse. However, he now began to think that this sluggish rate of increase might actually be the curse itself. If that was truly the case, Haruchika realized they were facing a serious problem. Even if he devoted all his effort to raising her affection value, he had no idea whether he could increase it enough before they reached the royal capital. A short while earlier, at the top of the cliff, Amelia desperately called out the names of Haruchika and Anais. Bengler approached her and asked what had happened. After Amelia explained the situation, Bengler immediately understood and ordered his men to seize her. The men quickly restrained Amelia, leaving her completely confused as she tried to understand the meaning behind Bengler's actions. Bengler explained that her assignment had been to protect the saintess. Since she had allowed the saintess to die, she would have to take responsibility for that failure. Before Amelia could object, Bengler ordered his men to take her to the royal capital. As they forced her to the ground, Amelia could only wonder how everything had come to this. She felt deep regret toward her master, and once again she desperately cried out Haruchika's name. After walking through the forest for some time, Anaisa's legs were clearly exhausted, so she asked Haruchika to wait for a moment. Haruchika urged her to keep moving, reminding her that they had just taken a break. Anais immediately raised her voice, telling him to be quiet. To her, that so-called short break had felt like it happened a long time ago. Haruchika noticed that Anais had completely stopped putting on the refined act she had maintained before. To him, that was actually a good sign. Nearby, Anais spotted a cut tree stump and immediately sat down on it, admitting that she simply could not keep going anymore. Haruchika remarked that she was being pathetic. Anais explained that she had spent almost her entire life inside the church and had never walked this much before. She asked him to show her at least a little consideration. She then asked how much farther they still had to travel. Haruchika estimated that it would take another 2 days. However, considering their current pace, it might even take 3. Anais was shocked by that answer and wondered if he was joking. Haruchika explained that once they had walked that far, they would reach the main highway. From there, they should be able to find a carriage. Anais then asked whether he even knew where they were inside the forest. Haruchika replied that he was an adventurer, so naturally he knew. In reality, however, it had been Jibril who had gone ahead to scout the route for him. Haruchika then tossed a container of water toward Anais. She was delighted and wondered where he had been hiding it. Haruchika simply replied that he had not been hiding it at all, while Jibril quietly pointed out that she had actually been the one who brought the water. Haruchika told Anais that once she had rested enough, they would continue moving. Later, the two resumed their journey. Along the way, they encountered wild animals. Haruchika climbed trees, crossed rivers, spent some time enjoying the river, and eventually rested once night fell. Haruchika checked Anais's affection value and noticed that after just 1 day, it had risen to -55. Even so, he realized the increase was incredibly slow. Jibril pointed out that they had already figured out that treating Anais roughly caused her affection value to rise. However, at the current pace, they would barely manage to bring it back from negative numbers to 0 before reaching the royal capital. Haruchika admitted that he already knew that. Whenever her affection value dropped, it decreased by dozens of points at a time. Yet whenever it increased, it only rose by 1 or 2 points. The difference was painfully slow. Haruchika continued wondering what was causing it. He reflected that being treated roughly seemed to be Anais's comfort zone. He began to suspect that this was exactly what made her affection value rise so slowly. Jibril pointed out that the value had dropped whenever Haruchika treated Anais politely. She wondered if the curse was responsible. Haruchika shook off that idea. He believed it probably was not because of the curse. He explained that a common trait among people suffering from imposter syndrome was feeling intense discomfort whenever they were treated in a way they believed exceeded what they deserved. Whenever Haruchika behaved in a way connected to that discomfort, Anaise's affection value immediately dropped. As far as he could tell, that was most likely the real reason. Jibril admitted that this was the part she still could not understand. She wondered why someone suffering from imposter syndrome would feel uncomfortable over something like that. At that moment, Haruchika's eyes suddenly widened as he realized something. Haruchika reflected that an imposter was someone living as a fraud. The reason that kind treatment felt so unpleasant was because such a person was convinced they were fake and did not deserve to be treated that way. They constantly feared that if their deception was exposed, everyone would blame them. In other words, if Anais no longer had to live as a fake, then that discomfort would disappear as well. Later, as they continued their journey through the forest, Anais was visibly exhausted. She called out to Haruchika and asked if they could slow down a little. Haruchika replied that monsters were bound to be living in the forest, and the slower they traveled, the more likely they would end up as their prey. Hearing that, Anais immediately became frightened and asked him not to scare her like that. Just then, someone suddenly appeared and announced their presence, startling Anais. At the same time, Haruchika immediately reached for his sword. Two men stepped into view. They looked surprised to find the saintess alive before them. The two men quickly knelt down, expressing their relief that she had survived. Anais also relaxed, recognizing that they belonged to the Holy Land Church. She asked whether they were alone and where Bengler had gone. One of the men explained that Bengler had already departed for the royal capital. He had gone there to explain the situation to the Royal Capital Church and organize a large-scale search. In the meantime, the two of them had been entrusted with conducting an urgent search. They also remarked that surviving a fall from such a great height was remarkable and exactly what they would expect from the saintess. Jibril quietly commented that it was a relief. Haruchika, however, realized that this meant his opportunity to travel alone with Anais had come to an end. Without any warning, one of the men suddenly drove a blade into Anais's stomach. Haruchika cried out in shock, while Anais herself was left confused, unable to understand what had just happened. The attacker admitted that he could hardly believe she had actually survived. Even so, he apologized and declared that, for everyone's sake, Anais had to die there. Haruchika immediately rushed toward Anais before the attackers could finish her off. The other man was already prepared to strike him down, but Haruchika successfully blocked the attack. He immediately launched a counterattack, slipped past his opponent's guard, and struck him down. The remaining man realized that Haruchika was coming after him and quickly fled. Haruchika chased after him while asking Jibril if she could heal Anais. Jibril immediately understood what needed to be done. Filled with frustration, Haruchika blamed himself for what had happened. He had assumed that only members of the Royal Capital Church wanted the saintess dead. At the same time, Jibril began healing Anais's wound. Inside her fading consciousness, Anais wondered whether this was how she was going to die. She bitterly reflected on what a miserable life she had lived. The attacker's words echoed in her mind, claiming that she had to die for everyone's sake. She could not understand what those words truly meant. Sometime later, Anais slowly opened her eyes again. She was confused, unable to understand how she had survived after being stabbed. Haruchika quietly acknowledged that she was finally awake. Behind him, the two attackers had already been captured and tied securely to a tree. Haruchika remarked that, as expected of the saintess, she had recovered immediately even after being stabbed. Anais became even more confused. She insisted that such a thing was impossible because she was not the real saintess. Haruchika pointed out that her wound had completely healed. Looking down at the place where she had been stabbed, Anais confirmed for herself that the injury had truly disappeared. At that point, Anais finally confessed the truth to Haruchika. She admitted that she was a fake. She possessed neither status nor noble blood. She had originally been taken in from the slums of the royal capital and became a novice sister. Because of her rough way of speaking and poor attitude, the other sisters constantly gossiped about her behind her back. Despite all of that, Bengler had always stood up for her. He patiently taught her everything she needed to know so she could live as a proper sister. Because of his kindness, Anais wanted nothing more than to be of some use to him. Then one day, she noticed Bengler looking deathly pale. Around that same time, one of the nuns from the Holy Land Church had been chosen through a divine oracle from the goddess to become the new saintess. That chosen woman was not Anais. However, shortly afterward, the newly selected saintess ran away with one of the friars. Realizing that this had all started because of another incident involving the goddess, Haruchika felt irritated. Anais explained that the report announcing the new saintess had already been sent to the central church. If the truth came out and they discovered that the saintess had eloped and disappeared, Bengler would be forced to take responsibility, and the Holy Land Church's standing would suffer greatly. If the central church decided to reduce its financial support, the orphans cared for by the church would ultimately be left to starve. Haruchika understood the situation and realized that this was why Anais had taken on the role of the false saintess. Anais confirmed that he was right. Haruchika then asked what would happen if her deception were exposed. Anais admitted that she would most likely be executed. Jubril wondered whether the truth would eventually come out anyway. After all, the saintess was expected to perform a miracle during the ceremony at the central church. Haruchika realized that once Anais reached the central church, everyone would expect her to perform a miracle. He asked what she planned to do when that happened. Anais admitted that she did not know. Bangler had simply told her that he would somehow take care of everything. Haruchika finally understood the entire situation. The incident at the cliff had been an incredibly ruthless setup. Even so, he saw it as an opportunity. If he could make use of these circumstances, he might finally have a clear path toward raising Anais's affection value to its maximum. Anais then told Haruchika that this was where their agreement should end. Since he no longer needed to concern himself with a troublesome fake like her, there was no reason for him to continue. Haruchika, however, saw things differently. The job he had accepted was to escort her safely, and whether she was real or fake made no difference to him. If anything, he actually felt more at ease after learning the truth. He pointed out that she had recovered completely even after being stabbed. Because of that, he even wondered if perhaps she might actually be the real saintess after all. With that, Haruchika reached out and offered his hand to her. Anais looked at him and could only think that he really enjoyed acting cool and that it irritated her.